Story 1.
My wife cheated on me with a 15-year friend during my work trip. I confronted them, got my revenge. I'm Steve, and my wife's Kate. We've been married for more than 3 years. The first year was really happy, the second was good, and the third had some issues. It might seem silly or childish, I can't say I disagree, but I'm not sure if you would react differently. We were in the middle of an argument. We've had a lot of those lately, Kate and I, but this one was really bad. I don't even know what it was about, something small like the laundry or an unpaid bill. Kate has this habit of bringing up irrelevant complaints during arguments, things that have nothing to do with what we're fighting about. It could be stuff from years ago, like when I didn't pick up her sister from a party, or just random things that occur to her to hit me with. This was one of those times. "And you just never stop talking, do you know that, Steve?" She said this in a harsh tone. Nothing makes you happier than the sound of your own voice, even when we're, in bed. There was silence. Kate must have seen from my face that she went too far. I was hurt, so I just looked at her. I thought about saying I had no idea my talking during closeness bothered her. It's how I express my love and excitement. But then I decided not to say anything. Kate continued, saying my talking distracts her during closeness and turns her off. I was surprised. Why hadn't she mentioned this before? We've been married for over 3 years, and I thought she enjoyed my affectionate words. She talked less than I did in bed, but she always said a few words. After a long silence, I stood up and told Kate I'd try to only speak when it's important. Then I left the room. Update, I wasn't proud of my actions afterward. All I can say is I felt really hurt. The unexpected argument hit me hard. I thought if she wanted silence, then she would get silence. Our fights were getting worse. Despite still loving Kate, we found it harder and harder to be content with each other. There were fewer happy times and more tense moments, and arguments over small things. A major issue was my job as a sales rep for a plumbing supply company, requiring me to travel for about 3 weeks, 4 days a month. Kate didn't like me being away so much, but she knew this before we got married. She also wanted to start a family, which I resisted for another 2 years. I expected a promotion that would let me stop traveling. I just didn't want to have a baby until I could be home all the time. So those were the big issues. Lately, even tiny things seemed to trigger fights. The reservoir of love and goodwill seemed almost empty, and I didn't know why. One thing Kate said kept bothering me, that my talking during closeness was the opposite of what turned her on. Did that mean she was enjoying closeness with someone else? Someone who didn't talk, it seemed far, fetched until I thought about it more, during my last trip about 10 days. Earlier, I couldn't reach her on the phone twice. The second time, she had her cell phone switched off when she should have been back from work. The next day, she said she went for a beer with friends, which seemed reasonable, except I called the house around 10:30 and she was still out. Also, in the past month, 3 times I answered the phone and the person hung up. Not a big deal, but it rarely happened before, so I got more suspicious and took action. For the next 2 weeks, Kate probably thought she was living with a mute. No small talk, no idle conversation, no words unless absolutely necessary. Instead of saying, "Could you pass the salt, honey?" I got up and got it myself. In response to, "What's the weather going to be like today?" I passed her the weather page of the newspaper. If she asked me to make dinner that night, all she got was, "Okay." When she left for work and said, "Goodbye, honey," I gave her a smile and a wave. It became a game to see how few words I could say to her in a day. Kate knew I was angry and hurt, and she knew why. At first, she didn't seem to care much, but after that, she started trying to make up. She didn't exactly apologize, that was rare in our house, but she became much more affectionate. Kisses greeted me in bed in the morning, on the way out for work, and at bedtime. Sometimes she leaned over to give me a hug while I was reading the paper over coffee in the morning, or rubbed my shoulders while we were watching TV. It was a funny thing, even as my anger gradually calmed down and nobody can stay white-hot angry over days, I kept saying as little as possible. Before speaking, I'd ask myself if I really needed to say it, and usually the answer was no. I was listening more, observing more, and keeping my thoughts to myself. About 10 days after the argument, Kate suggested we make love. Whether she wanted to or it was part of making up, I couldn't tell. After dinner, during which she told me some stories about work and I spoke no more than 6 words, she stood up and took me by the hand, urging me to leave the dishes for later. With a big, warm smile, she conveyed that there was something else she needed at that moment. As she led me back to the bedroom, I wondered if the distance between us had grown because of my silence, or if I was silent because we had already drifted so far apart. During the entire encounter, I hadn't uttered a word. As we coupled smoothly, easily, and familiarly, I remained completely silent, feeling a sense of unnatural coldness and distance. I wasn't even sure if it was what Kate truly wanted, but after that argument, I had no intention of saying a word. After we finished, I rolled off her, and she snuggled into me, emitting a happy, Without any verbal communication, we relaxed together for a while, still without exchanging any words. I couldn't discern what the experience had been like for her. For me, it felt cold and empty, and whether that was due to the silence or the growing distance between us remained uncertain. Update: after a few more days of minimal conversation, Kate became upset with me. One night during dinner, she expressed frustration, questioning my silence and whether I had anything to say. After a moment of thought, I responded that I thought this was what she wanted. She clarified, explaining that she desired a husband who communicates and shares feelings, not someone resembling a mannequin from a department store. Privately, I chuckled, thinking, "Good one, Kate." Last week she had complained about me talking too much, so I was making an effort to rectify that. Kate accused me of taking the silent treatment too far, labeling it the Silent Sam routine. I looked at her for a moment before speaking. Some of my confusion was intended to annoy her, and partly, I was genuinely puzzled. I honestly didn't know what she wanted. First, I talked too much, then, too little. "How am I supposed to know what to do now?" She glared at me, clearly very angry, insisting that I stop and be the man she married. I regretted my earlier words, stating that she doesn't talk too much. We were arguing. I was upset, and I just threw that at her. After a pause, I added, "All right, Kate, but I have to admit, your words got me thinking that maybe I do talk too much, or without thinking first about whether I really have anything to say." After a moment, I smiled at her, saying, "In a way, all this has been helpful." She smiled back warmly, her anger seemingly gone, and for a moment I felt the closeness between us that had been missing. I then brought up the topic of making love, genuinely seeking to understand. I asked if she meant what she said about not talking during closeness. Rather than answering my question, Kate left the table. For the rest of the evening, she gave me the cold shoulder, which didn't seem fair despite my honest attempt to understand her feelings. The next morning brought a more hopeful atmosphere. Kate had stepped back from her initial attack, expressing a desire for communication. Unfortunately, her focus remained on the end of the conversation, evident in her glares and tight-lipped phrases at breakfast. We endured a few more days of minimal communication, ironic this time, as she was giving me the silent treatment. After 3 to 4 days, Kate's mood drastically changed again. She came home from work looking very upset and headed straight for the shower. Over dinner, she was distracted, saying little and frequently losing track of my conversation. This wasn't the angry, silent treatment anymore. She was clearly preoccupied with something. But when I asked her if something was wrong, and I asked several times, she only mentioned a problem at work. I noticed, though, that she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. Unsure of what was bothering her, I decided to wait and see. The next day, I received a call at work. Ernie Matazzo confirmed my suspicions about Kate having an affair. I thanked him, left work, and went home. Looking at the photos, the only surprise was the guy, Adam, who hadn't been my best man but was one of my groomsmen. He'd always admired Kate, and I'd never considered him a threat. I felt cold and empty, like the last time Kate and I were in bed together. I sat for a long time, contemplating everything, and pulled out the photos, finding them unchanged from the first time I put them away. Update: when Kate arrived home, she found me seated on the couch, seemingly idle. I remained quiet as she greeted me, my expression crafted to appear neutral rather than angry. Her inquiry about my unusual behavior grew more pointed, a blend of concern and annoyance evident in her edgier tone as she probed further, sensing that something was amiss. I maintained my silence. Frustration welled within her as she pressed for an explanation, insinuating a return to the silent treatment of the past. In response, I sat up, cutting through the tension with a direct question. I asked her how long she had been dating him. Kate, taken aback, recoiled in shock and retreated a step. Perplexed, she took a seat across from me, seeking to understand my accusation. Her attempts to read my expression proved futile. The atmosphere thickened as she continued to deny any involvement with someone else, clasping her hands tightly in her lap as she implored me to reveal the source of my accusations. Her plea, laden with frustration, suggested that I harbored a guilty conscience. Unyielding, I presented an envelope containing a photograph, a damning image of Kate on Adam's bed. She looked at it briefly, dropped it in surprise, and recoiled as though it were a threat. Blushing, she retreated into her chair, avoiding eye contact. In the face of my persistent silence, she decided to change the subject, heading for the bedroom. However, I intercepted her with the incriminating photo. She hesitated, and unable to escape my unrelenting gaze, she finally met my eyes with a silent plea. "How long?" I reiterated. Her response was a withdrawal into herself, arms wrapped tightly around her as she shook her head. The silence lingered, and she eventually appealed to me, requesting that I spare her from discussing the matter. Declaring my decision to leave, I moved toward the bedroom to pack. In a desperate plea, she implored me to wait, promising to disclose everything. Relenting, I resumed my seat, observing her as she struggled to maintain eye contact. Unable to endure the silence, she confessed, apologizing and expressing remorse as she pleaded with me not to leave. I remained seated, meeting her gaze with an unwavering expression. She averted her eyes, and after a moment, she mustered the courage to look back at me, tearfully admitting that Adam had told her I was also involved. Surprised, I refrained from questioning her and gestured for her to continue. Kate explained that a month earlier she had encountered Adam at the supermarket. He, being charming and friendly, had offered her companionship in my absence, arriving at our house with pizza and wine. They spent a casual evening together, misled by Adam's claim that I too was engaged in similar actions. Towards the end, he started acting worried and concerned. When Kate questioned him about it, he claimed I had been unfaithful. He did an impressive job at acting, appearing reluctant, with his head hanging, avoiding an eye contact with me. According to him, you and he had a conversation a couple of weeks earlier where you confessed about a girl you were involved with during your trips. He provided convincing details about her appearance, where you met, and how great you said she was in bed. I started crying, and Adam consoled me, expressing admiration for my beauty and how he couldn't fathom how any man could cheat on me. A little while later, we ended up in bed together, and I only found out yesterday that the entire story was false. I waited, expressionless. She continued, her expression now more somber than before. I found myself in his apartment, she said. After he had this smug demeanor. He brought up the notion that if it weren't for your involvement with Julia, we wouldn't have realized how well we connect. I raised the issue of inconsistency, reminding him that during our initial conversation about your supposed lover, he had mentioned the name Joanne. He couldn't recall any of the details, like her appearance or how you met. Frustrated, I screamed at him to tell me the truth. Did you really cheat on me? He laughed, admitting it was just a story to get me into bed. Kate's face turned red with anger. I got up, threw on my clothes, and berated him, calling him out for making a fool of me, she continued. He just lay there, smiling, unapologetic and unremorseful. I couldn't believe what I had done. She trailed off, her voice choked with emotion, and then she broke down, sobbing with her face in her hands, her body heaving. The urge to comfort Kate was overshadowed by a cold emptiness. Was she truly that naive, or had our love deteriorated to the point where she was willing to believe even the most absurd stories? And then there was my rage at Adam, a friend of 15 years. I sat in silence while Kate sobbed. After about 5 minutes, I stood up. Kate watched me fearfully as I took her cell phone from her purse, put it in my pocket, and went to the bedroom and kitchen, unplugging the phones and putting them in a bag under my arm. Before departing, I glanced back at Kate and conveyed that I would return. I instructed her not to leave and cautioned against engaging in conversations with anyone. Despite my quiet tone, she appeared terrified and affirmed my instructions with a nod. Update on the way to Adam S. I focused on controlling my breath to appear calm and friendly. When Adam opened his door, he seemed surprised and nervous. Without hesitation, I invited him for a couple of beers and suggested watching the Phillies, saying Kate was at a meeting. Though he observed me carefully, he put on a friendly demeanor and agreed to my proposal. We sat in his living room, chatting amiably while the game played in the background. Keeping the conversation light, I noticed Adam gradually relaxing, thinking it was a casual visit. However, I remained uncertain about the situation. It took more than an hour to steer the conversation toward relationships. I inquired about the ladies he was dating, making him momentarily nervous, but my reassuring smile prompted him to share details about a girl from work he'd been seeing casually. I mentioned a talkative college girlfriend, and Adam took the bait, agreeing that actions speak louder than words during intimate moments. Laughing, he boasted about revealing the desires of many girls, expressing satisfaction. Leaning in, I asked about Kate's preferences, catching him off guard. After a moment of shock, he tried to laugh it off, but I kept pressing him with a smile. He finally agreed to be quiet, looking at me fearfully. Expressing my disbelief, I confronted him about betraying our friendship and deceiving my wife to have an affair with her. Downplaying it, he claimed it wasn't a big deal, arguing, she's just a woman. He trailed off uncertainly, looking at my face. Staring at him in disbelief, I questioned how I had ever been friends with him. Asserting that things were better out in the open, I insisted he tell me everything about his deceitful game with Kate. Having already talked to her, I warned that lying wouldn't work. Wide-eyed and genuinely afraid, Adam nodded at me, signaling his readiness to talk. He recounted the story, aligning closely with what Kate had said. He had always found her attractive and had been flirting with her for several months whenever he encountered her. He was single. One week he bumped into her at the supermarket and saw his chance. Initially thinking he could seduce her, he fabricated a story about my affair. When it became apparent she wouldn't, he cheat on me. He deliberately angered her and made her feel sorry for herself, making it easier to get her into bed. They met about 5 more times, always at his place. The first encounter was great because she was upset about my alleged affair, she cried. However, the subsequent times were fantastic, exactly as he described. When he noticed my disapproval, he abruptly stopped talking. I had cut his hair almost to the roots by then, finding satisfaction in picturing him hiding his head with hats for weeks. Coldly, I inquired if it was over. After a brief hesitation, he admitted it was and shared that she found out about the fabricated story. Unable to recall the name of the supposed girl I was dating, she got angry and left. I was ready to leave, feeling empty. Although I could have pressed for more details, I decided against it. I informed Adam that our friendship was over, warning against retaliation. We agreed not to involve the police. He nodded, looking more humiliated than angry, and requested to be released. Smiling, I assured him I'd leave the apartment door open, allowing him to free himself in about an hour. I walked away without turning back. Update: upon my return, Kate was seated on the couch in her bathrobe, her wet hair indicating recent distress. As I moved around the apartment, fixing the phones, she remained visibly scared and unhappy. Taking a seat across from her, we exchanged glances, but I maintained my silence. Eventually, she inquired about my actions, to which I explained the conversation with Adam, assuring her that I hadn't. T resorted to violence and expressing doubt about hearing from him anytime soon. Despite acknowledging that she almost wished I had confronted him physically, she recognized the potential consequences. Troubled, she sought to move past the situation, admitting her foolishness and asking for forgiveness. I looked at her for a prolonged moment before responding, our pattern of saying very little to each other becoming a habit. "I dawned to know," I finally replied, and it was an honest admission. Tears welled up in her eyes as she began to cry. The following morning, Kate entered the kitchen, expressing delight at the breakfast and coffee set on the table. Her joy faded abruptly upon noticing the 2 large suitcases near the door. Distraught, she questioned my departure, pleading with me not to leave. Instead of leaving without a word, I served her a cup of coffee and persuaded her to sit across from me. "Kate, it's over," I declared. I admitted uncertainty about what had transpired or why, but emphasized that our relationship had deteriorated. Despite acknowledging our initial compatibility, I highlighted a year of impatience, snappiness, and constant fighting. I pointed out that her choice to believe Adam's dubious story about my infidelity and her subsequent actions indicated a departure from the woman I had married. I suggested she must have been on the verge of straying for our relationship to reach this point. Pausing, I waited for her response, but she cried silently, holding her face in her hands. When I ceased speaking, she looked up at me pleadingly. I offered her an opportunity to speak, to prove me wrong, to outline a path to revive our love. Regrettably, she remained silent, merely gazing at me and crying. I headed to the door, bidding her farewell as I picked up my suitcases and departed.
Story 2.
I didn't deserve what my husband did to me just because of my so-called innocent mistake of cheating. My name is Michael, and I've been married to Jennifer for 17 years. We have 2 kids, a son named Jacob and a daughter named Emily. Jennifer has been consistently arriving home late from work for a while now, and today was no different. It was nearly 10 p.m. The kids and I had already eaten dinner, completed our homework, and they had been in bed for about an hour. They hadn't even asked about their mom or why she wasn't home. This was a recent change, and it saddened me. I had spent the past hour reviewing our finances. Over the last 2 years, our financial situation had significantly deteriorated. Our income had dropped considerably, although my wife seemed oblivious to it as she continued to spend freely. It felt like she thought we had no financial worries at all. I had just finished paying our most recent bills, and we might be able to get by for a couple more months. I had also been reevaluating my life plan. Perhaps I had made a mistake. For the past 2 years, I had been staring at a looming problem, wondering if and when it would finally catch up with us. I always assumed it would eventually, but doubts were starting to creep in. I'm not sure how long she stood there watching me. Lately, I'd been lost in my own thoughts more often, causing me to lose track of time. Finally, with her arms crossed and that all-too-familiar look of disapproval on her face, she spoke, "Michael, I want a divorce." I'm not entirely certain about my emotions in that specific moment. My spirit felt incredibly burdened by self-doubt and self-loathing, almost rendering me numb to any new feelings. It wasn't exactly a humorous situation, yet I found myself trying to suppress a laugh. My wife, with whom I had spent 17 years, had just informed me that our relationship was coming to an end. And everything we had built together was unraveling. It was a sensation I hadn't experienced in a while, and it almost brought a sense of relief. I gazed at her briefly, allowing myself one last trip down memory lane to revisit our happier times. Then it was back to reality. I excelled more as a programmer than as a manager. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, programmers often get promoted to become project leaders, then department heads, and finally, senior management. This is how I ended up as the senior manager of product development, which sounded impressive but was essentially a glorified sales position. The truth was, at that time, I was the most qualified person for the job. I had essentially birthed our flagship product line by myself, nurtured it through its early stages, and guided it through 6 subsequent upgrades. I knew our product inside and out. When customers had questions, I had answers. When our staff faced issues, I knew how to resolve them. With a new haircut and an expensive suit, I certainly looked the part. I had more proficiency as a programmer than as a manager. Regrettably, the typical career progression for programmers involves moving up to become project leaders, then department heads, and ultimately senior management. This sequence led to me becoming the senior manager of product development. It sounded impressive, but it was essentially a fancy title for a sales role. In reality, I was the most qualified for the job at that time. I had essentially created our flagship product line almost single-handedly, nurturing it through its early stages and overseeing its growth through 6 successive upgrades. I possessed the most in-depth knowledge of our product. I could provide answers to customer inquiries and resolve staff issues with ease. A new hairstyle and an expensive suit completed the image. It came as no surprise when I was let go from Chicago Technology Solutions. If I had been my own supervisor, I likely would have made the same decision. My attendance at meetings had been inconsistent at best, and we had missed too many deadlines. I wasn't deliberately trying to get fired at the time, but I also didn't put forth much effort to retain my position at CTS. I had been in a prolonged slump. It took nearly 3 months to emerge from my initial state of depression and attempt to move forward. However, that endeavor had also been a dismal failure. It took me another month to find a solution to my predicament, or at least one I could accept. If I hadn't had the kids, I believe I might have gone insane. Their well-established routine became my lifeline, helping me regain a sense of positivity. It was a constant cycle of breakfast, school, snack, homework, dinner, and bedtime. Embracing this routine became my guiding principle, and it gradually led me back to a more stable life. I fully embraced the role of a stay-at-home dad, taking charge of household chores and being the kids' chauffeur. The children genuinely appreciated my increased presence at home, which made me realize that I still had value. I wasn't entirely without worth. If my wife noticed the shift in our family dynamic, she never acknowledged it. I'm almost certain she didn't even recognize it. My first encounter with Jennifer Riley occurred at a fraternity mixer I had nearly decided not to attend. I joined the fraternity primarily for the post-graduation opportunities it would offer, not for partying during college. I believed I would need all the advantages I could get. My academic performance was outstanding, so I wasn't concerned about that. However, in all other aspects, I was simply average. Height, weight, looks, personality, just average. Jennifer, on the other hand, was the kind of average that looked much better on a woman. She was somewhat reserved, a bit of a wallflower. I observed her for quite a while before mustering the courage to strike up a conversation. Our initial interaction was brief and hushed, but we introduced ourselves. Over the next few weeks, we met for coffee and shared study sessions at the library. We had been conversing for almost 2 months before our first official date. From that moment forward, it became the most incredible period of my life. We enjoyed 15 years of pure happiness. Our courtship was brief and our engagement even briefer. Shortly after graduating, we got married and settled into our first apartment in Chicago. We commuted together, taking the morning and evening trains to and from our first jobs. Finances were tight, but we faced it as a united front. We shared almost everything in common: family backgrounds, dating histories, interests, and aspirations. Where we didn't align, we complemented each other. If there was something I wasn't good at, Jennifer excelled, and vice versa. I managed our finances more effectively, while Jennifer expertly handled our social and family schedules. We collaborated seamlessly, and our lives quickly improved. Over the next few years, we both received multiple promotions. Our circle of friends grew significantly. We managed to save money for our first home while still enjoying travel and entertainment. Our intimate life mirrored our relationship's progression, slowly but steadily. Holding hands and sharing kisses from our first date, we gradually progressed to more intimate moments when we became exclusive. 8 years into our marriage, Jennifer left her job when our son Jacob was born, followed by our daughter Emily a little over a year later. We purchased a suburban 3-bedroom house with enough space for a dog. Along with the house, we bought a family sedan and a minivan. In general, our lives were falling into place nicely. 2 kids, a pet, a house, and 2 cars. It was completely ordinary, and I didn't think I could be any happier. However, I was mistaken. My promotion to manager came shortly after Emily's first birthday. It felt like a reward for years of blending in with the average crowd without complaining. As I mentioned, my new salary was quite substantial, and we didn't take it for granted. I had flexible hours, mostly working from home and only heading to the office for staff and management team meetings. They say that money can't buy happiness, and I believe that's true. What it can buy, though, are stylish clothes, personal grooming, better health care, a newer home, a nicer neighborhood, and confidence. I went from being average to slightly above average. My wife transformed from being average, which I already found beautiful, to slightly above average, which I now thought was incredibly attractive. Our already good bed life reached new heights. We traveled more comfortably, spent quality time with our children, and saved more money for retirement. When Emily began attending elementary school, Jennifer expressed her desire to return to part-time work. She quickly found a job at a startup marketing firm that she thought she'd enjoy. Her work routine aligned with dropping off and picking up the kids from school, which was a great addition. We didn't rely on her income, so we could save it. Based on my calculations, we were on track to retire comfortably by the time our kids finished college. Update: I stumbled upon the fact that my wife was having an affair 3 months before our 15th wedding anniversary, purely by accident on my birthday. In reality, I had discovered the evidence 2 days before my birthday, but it took me a few weeks to piece it all together. Initially, I didn't think much of Jennifer taking a more active role in her new job. It meant she'd be working a few extra hours a week, and I didn't mind picking up the kids from school. It didn't significantly disrupt my schedule. About 3 months into her new role, I noticed she seemed preoccupied quite often, so I asked her about it. She explained that she was adjusting to her job and feeling a bit stressed. In an effort to ease her burden, I decided to take on more responsibilities at home. When our passionate bed life began to decline noticeably, we had a conversation about it. She explained that she was getting older and didn't feel the need to have closeness as frequently. Surprisingly, it was the first time I'd heard her use the F word, but things did improve for a while. Our physical intimacy did pick up for a few weeks, but then decreased again. I hesitated to bring it up once more, fearing an argument. I was nearly at my wit's end when I stumbled upon the gift. The weather had turned cooler, and I was searching for one of my sweaters. I'd taken on the laundry duties and sometimes mixed up which closet the clothes should go in. While sifting through sweaters on her closet shelf, I noticed it hidden behind several old shoe boxes. It was hard to miss the unmistakable pink box with a white ribbon from the lingerie store. The card addressed to lover piqued my curiosity. A brief internal struggle ensued. Should I look, or should I wait? Ultimately, I chose to open it. I wasn't sure if I could wait until my birthday to enjoy my wife. After reading the card, please disregard the packaging of this gift. You can unwrap your actual present on your birthday when I'm wearing what's inside the box. Then you can have my last virginity. Love always, Jennifer. For the next 48 hours, I made extra efforts. I greeted her with flowers at the door, gave her a foot massage, and cooked her favorite dinner. Her response wasn't what I had anticipated. It seemed like she was merely tolerating my affection. On my birthday, I ensured that the kids finished their homework early to avoid any interruptions to my gift. I was somewhat surprised when Jennifer arrived home late from work, and her question about dinner left me even more puzzled. However, I played along in anticipation of my surprise. I suggested going out for pizza, which delighted the kids, and we headed out. Michael had conspired with our waitress, and just before we left, the waitstaff serenaded me with a rendition of Happy Birthday. I thought I detected surprise in my wife's eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "I'll give you your present later, Michael," she said, wearing a smile. The drive home was filled with tension, and I nearly got into an accident. The 15 minutes of waiting for the kids to get ready for bed felt brutal, but the following 15 minutes waiting for them to fall asleep were excruciating. Thankfully, Jennifer returned from an emergency trip to the store for milk shortly after the kids had fallen asleep. When I reached the bedroom door, Jennifer wasn't in the room. I sat on the bed, growing increasingly frustrated with the games. When would I receive my gift? She emerged from the bathroom wearing a full-length flannel nightgown, her face devoid of makeup, and her hair tied in a ponytail. At this point, I was becoming quite frustrated with the whole situation. When would I finally receive my present? She climbed into bed, pulled up the covers, and reached for her bedside lamp, then paused. Oops, I almost forgot. She opened a drawer on her nightstand and retrieved a small square box wrapped in the multicolored balloon paper we had used for Michael's last birthday. She handed it to me, saying, "Happy birthday, dear." With that, she rolled over, turned off her lamp, and went to sleep. I was too shocked to even open her gift. The next day, my depression hit me full force. I kept replaying the day's events in my mind, trying to figure out what I had done to put such a damper on our evening. I felt completely lost and wallowed in my despair for nearly 2 weeks. That present seemed to taunt me, a constant reminder of my failure. I've heard all the cliches like, the husband is the last to know, but I must admit that I was genuinely clueless. The idea of Jennifer cheating on me was so foreign that it never crossed my mind. However, it was the first thing that popped into my head when she called home 13 days after my birthday saying, "It's Alan's 30th birthday, and the staff is taking him out to celebrate. I might be home pretty late." I don't recall how I responded or even walking to the bedroom closet, but I do remember staring at the empty space where my present had been. I also remember the excruciating pain in my chest and rushing to the bathroom to throw up. For longer than I'd like to admit, I thought I might be having a heart attack, and for a brief moment, I wished it were true, hoping for an escape from the pain. Alan Henderson, Jennifer's boss, was a slick and somewhat sleazy-looking advertising executive, a few years younger than both Jennifer and me. I had met him only once, and I distinctly remembered not liking him, mostly because he came across as insincere whenever he spoke. It was Emily who snapped me back to reality, asking, "Are you okay, Daddy?" It took a few moments for my eyes to focus on my daughter, who was standing over me on the verge of tears. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Daddy just ate something that upset his stomach. I'll be out in just a minute. I need to clean up." Eventually, I made it out of the bathroom, though I don't recall much after that. I do remember grabbing my dusty bottle of scotch. Judging by the headache I woke up with the next morning, I knew I had downed several glasses. I had no clue when Jennifer had come home. When I found her in the kitchen feeding the kids the next morning, she appeared as though nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. She was simply going through her routine. It was the slight wince I noticed on her face when she sat down to eat that shattered any remaining love I had. It was incredibly subtle, but it was there. I wish I could tell you that I confronted my cheating wife, but I didn't. I was utterly devastated. Moving was all I could manage, and things didn't improve for several weeks. I felt like a zombie each day as I observed my wife going through the motions at home without a care in the world. I felt progressively worse. I thought I had hit rock bottom. Update 1. It wasn't until the weekend of my 15th wedding anniversary that I finally shook myself out of it and decided to take action. To be honest, I had been acting like a wimp. I knew it, and there's probably some psychological term for my behavior. If my dad were alive, he'd simply call me a fool, and he'd be right. The fog in my mind lifted when my wife mentioned she had to travel for a work conference during our anniversary. I'm not entirely sure why it bothered me, but it did. It felt like one more level of disrespect. Her complete disregard for the date hurt. After drowning my sorrows in alcohol on our anniversary night, I woke up angry and had reached my breaking point. I called my lawyer and scheduled an appointment. I was ready to end this charade, convinced that my life couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. The fierce determination with which I entered my attorney's office was quickly replaced by crushing disbelief. I knew divorces could be challenging, and I thought that my wife's affair would work in my favor. Instead, my lawyer poked holes in my case one after the other. I had no concrete evidence of the affair, and even if I did, it wouldn't make much of a difference. Our assets would likely be split 50-50ths. I had no proof of my wife being an unfit parent, so shared custody was the best I could hope for. Our income disparity also favored my wife. I would have to pay spousal maintenance and child support. She would probably get primary custody and stay in the house for the children's sake. I felt like a betrayed fool, and my wife seemed to get away with everything. I went from feeling depressed to completely distraught. Even my unfaithful wife noticed after a few weeks and asked about it. "You look really worn out, Michael. Is something bothering you?" I replied with a forced, "No, dear." At least she made an effort to pretend she cared, while I just drifted through life. Then I lost my job, although I didn't realize it at the time. Strangely, it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. My glimmer of hope came from an unexpected source, the evening news. I was watching a series of depressing stories that seemed to match my mood perfectly. However, one story caught my attention. A major East Coast employer had gone bankrupt. Former employees were struggling to receive their final paychecks and were worried about their pensions. For once, I felt like some people might be in an even worse situation than me. Then the news analyst shared his thoughts. The employees might win a judgment against their former employer, but it wouldn't matter because there was no money left. It didn't take much for me to connect the dots and come up with a basic plan. After all, my wife couldn't take what didn't exist. If we had nothing, we would split nothing. Yes, I would be sacrificing my share, but since I was already going to lose half, did the rest really matter? My plan started out quite simple. I was unemployed and had no intention of looking for work. I decided to spend our life savings until there was nothing left. I admit it was a foolish idea, and even I had doubts about its success, but it was something I could hold on to. 2 years can feel like an eternity. It was excruciatingly dull for me, especially since I was alone most of the time. It became evident that Jennifer had been the life of our friend group. As she distanced herself from me, I found myself lacking strong friendships. Being an only child with both parents passing away at a young age left me truly isolated. I won't bore you with a detailed day-to-day account of my life during this period. In simple terms, it was a miserable 2 years. The only bright spot during this time was my children. Before this, I had never spent money on anything unnecessary. I was meticulous about keeping receipts for every purchase. I began making small weekly cash withdrawals and saving the money. After about 2 months, it struck me that we weren't spending money quickly enough to make a significant difference. It turned out that I was excellent at saving money, but not so great at spending it. So I decided to step up my game and make some changes to my initial plan. I enrolled in an executive MBA program at a local but expensive university. This single decision cost me nearly $120,000. I paid for a new luxury SUV in cash, totaling $60,000. I also fully funded educational savings accounts for my kids, which set me back another $260,000. I splurged on a new wardrobe and began taking increasingly large cash withdrawals twice a week. Interestingly, I rarely used the money for gambling during these outings. I spent a few dollars here and there just to keep myself entertained. I made sure to spend enough to create the appearance that I had spent the day at the casino, complete with receipts for meals, snacks, and parking fees. Most of the money, however, went into a wall safe in our garage, serving as my personal post-divorce emergency fund in case things turned ugly. My other costly endeavor, I hired full-time private surveillance on my wife and her lover. I requested a comprehensive package, including video footage, photos, and a daily diary of events. I'm a bit embarrassed to admit how much that set me back. You might be wondering if my wife noticed my spending habits. I'd say she did, except for the gambling part. I had to inform her about the money transfer to the kids because I needed her signature for the custodial accounts. She also saw my new car and clothing. Strangely, she never mentioned them. I'm pretty sure she believed I was working and that we were still living a comfortable life. She made a few purchases herself, and I didn't question her about them. I often wondered who was benefiting from her more frequent lingerie purchases, but it was a topic we never discussed. We maintained a cordial but distant relationship, interacting daily as if we were merely tolerating roommates who didn't particularly like each other. As for our bed life, well, that was a non-existent subject. Spending time with my children was the best part of my life. I made sure to support their interests, whether it was working on homework together or playing games. We enjoyed outings to parks, went on bike rides, and watched movies. Since I had taken on the role of the house chef, my kids seemed interested in helping out with cooking. I found some simple recipes for us to try, and they eagerly joined in. Jennifer was usually around during the week, but I didn't exclude her from our family time nor actively include her. If she wanted to participate, she did so without any special effort on my part. I received a weekly report detailing my wife's activities. At first, I believed she was involved with her boss, but it turned out she had been with a few guys from her office. A few months later, even the company's clients made their way into her social calendar. Did it hurt? Not really. I already had a low opinion of her. Having proof didn't affect me much. The report wasn't very intriguing. The videos were poorly made and didn't excite me much. It became evident that Alan Henderson wasn't a skilled lover despite having the chance to be intimate with several different women. This surprised me. I had assumed, given the gift she bought, that he and my wife were in some kind of relationship, but it seemed more like casual encounters. He engaged with her despite his slightly below-average size, and she went along with it. The same held true for most of the other 6 men involved with my wife. However, there was one client, a nerdy-looking guy with glasses and a pocket protector that cemented his geek status, who seemed particularly enthusiastic with Jennifer. The pictures and videos were too grainy to determine if she enjoyed it, but it appeared rather painful to me. About a year into this journey, I realized I hadn't experienced a pleasant. It didn't really bother me. It was just one more thing adding to my miserable existence. After a year, I decided to stop the surveillance. I had seen enough, and reviewing the material had become more of a chore filled with garbage. Despite having classes, looking after the kids, and my gambling, I had plenty of free time. So I focused on what life might be like after my marriage, which I assumed would end at some point. I began a new exercise routine. I had always been in decent shape, nothing exceptional, of course. Over time, I made some good progress with my bench press and running stamina. I believed that having huge muscles and good looks was mostly genetic, and clearly I didn't fit into either category. Nevertheless, I was personally satisfied with my appearance. I started researching the latest news in my former industry because I figured I would need a job eventually. Being away for a year had put me further behind than I thought. I spent a few hours each day learning about the latest technologies and software packages. I took a particular interest in my old company, CTS. It seemed they were stagnant. They weren't losing market share and their revenues were stable, but they weren't making significant progress. In the tech business, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. I also invested a considerable amount of time in researching divorces. While I did spend some time coming up with new and potentially devious plans for dealing with my hopefully soon-to-be ex-wife, most of my time was spent studying how divorce affects children. I had already worked through much of my pain, and the children had played a significant role in that. I wanted to ensure that when their transition came, I would be fully prepared. There is a lot of information available, although I found a substantial portion of it to be unhelpful. Update 2. About 8 months later into my journey, I began to feel anxious. My wife started returning home at a regular time, engaging in conversations about my day. I responded briefly, but she persisted. She began dressing more provocatively for bedtime, as if trying to revive the intimacy we once had. Things went from bad to worse after a few weeks. For a year and a half, she had been distant and merely going through the motions. Now she started complaining about our lack of communication and talked about working on our marriage. In response, I chose complete silence. Her efforts to reconcile continued until her birthday. I left her gift on the dining room table using the same wrapping paper she had used for my last gift. The contents of the present shouldn't have come as a surprise. It had taken me 6 months to open the last birthday gift she had given me, a cheap digital watch. When I stumbled upon a similar watch in the impulse buy section of our local 24-hour convenience store, priced at $9.95, I initially felt irritated, but when I saw they had a matching ladies' model, my resentment faded. I purchased it and waited 18 months to give it to her. I almost wish I could have witnessed her reaction, but unfortunately, I wasn't around when she opened the gift. The kids and I had an impromptu movie night that lasted late, and she had already left by the time we woke up the next day. Everything quickly returned to my new normal. Jennifer started spending more and more time at the office, and our communication at home became minimal. Then it happened. Michael, I want a divorce. I had hoped she would get it over with swiftly, but it took almost a week before I was served with her divorce petition, which I found rather amusing. The petition included requests for spousal and child support, unequal distribution of assets in her favor, and cited mental and emotional cruelty as relevant factors. I decided to wait until the following Monday to take the kids camping, as I didn't want them around when things escalated. We returned 6 days later, feeling relaxed and rejuvenated, only to find Jennifer waiting for us at home. She was sitting alone in the living room, looking unwell. I wondered which part of my counteraction surprised her the most. I had filed for divorce in response, citing adultery and seeking the house, our primary asset, and full custody of the children. I also requested spousal and child support, because I had been unemployed and taking care of the kids full-time for 2 years. Additionally, I initiated alienation of affection lawsuits against Jennifer's 7 sexual partners, though I had no illusions about winning them. I also filed civil lawsuits against her employer and the companies of the 3 clients who had engaged in relations with my wife. Once again, I didn't believe I could emerge victorious, but the negative publicity might turn things in my favor. Ultimately, I dispatched a DVD containing Jennifer's incriminating moments to her parents and her best friend, as a clear message that I wouldn't hesitate to use it. Even though all the evidence had been mentioned in my countersuit, I wanted to eliminate any chances. The kids grabbed a snack and went to their rooms to prepare for bedtime, paying little attention to their mother. She made no attempt to engage with them. I headed to the fridge for a beer, then settled into the chair across from Jennifer in the living room. Oh, Jennifer, I don't hate you. Hatred requires effort. To be completely honest, I haven't put forth any effort when it comes to you. All my energy is focused on taking care of myself and my children. But I am your wife. Stop. I won't tolerate someone like you tarnishing my wife's good name. My wife was a loving and caring woman, my closest friend and partner, and the mother of my children. She's gone. You've taken her place, but don't act as if you have any connection to me. It was a long while before she spoke again. What should I do now? Is that a rhetorical question, or do you genuinely want my input? I didn't let her respond before continuing. I suppose there are several potential solutions for your situation. You could move far away and attempt to start a new life. That's the choice I'd make. I'll never allow my children to spend significant time with you, so that shouldn't factor into your decision to leave. Alternatively, you could try to tough it out here, lingering around town, trying to keep your head up. But who knows who will hear about your little escapades or who would want to employ someone like you. You might find someone willing to settle for a person with your reputation, but what kind of a despicable individual would that be? Alternatively, you could reflect on your actions. I genuinely hope you don't choose that path. It would deny me the pleasure of witnessing your suffering just as you deserve. Then again, I'm not sure my opinion holds any significance for someone as foolish as you. It certainly didn't when you decided to become involved with your boss. I had been imagining delivering that speech for months. I should have felt content about the chance to say it while I watched each word crush whatever remained of her spirit. I had anticipated finding some satisfaction, however, I only felt hollow instead. Final update: life after the divorce had its ups and downs. I achieved better results with my lawsuits than I had initially expected. I received slightly over $1 million in settlements from the 3 companies whose employees had been involved with my ex-wife. It was surprising because my lawyer had advised me not to anticipate much. After reviewing the situation, we concluded that they didn't want to risk negative publicity after witnessing how we handled my ex-wife's company. We had dismantled my ex-wife's company through legal tactics like discovery motions, depositions, and leaking information to the media. I also launched a subtle campaign, reaching out to the CEOs of their remaining clients with details about my wife, her boss, and their illicit activities, asking, "Do you really want to stay associated with this company when things go south?" It took time, but gradually their revenues dwindled. Employees who didn't want to be linked to the scandal left their jobs. Ultimately, the company declared bankruptcy. Alan Henderson was dismissed and left town in disgrace. While the $200,000 check I received was smaller compared to my other victories, it was much more satisfying. I didn't receive anything from my alienation of affection lawsuits, as I'd never really expected to. Nevertheless, 4 wives managed to secure substantial settlements and subsequent divorces. It wasn't all celebrations and happiness. I also suffered in the process. Encounters with people aware of my situation were not uncommon. The mocking and teasing were quite intense for a while. I don't know whether it was fortunate or unfortunate that I didn't really care. I already felt like a failure, so hearing it from others didn't have much impact on me. Some of the insults were surprisingly witty. I managed to shield my children from most of the negative consequences. Their well-being had always been my top priority. They were upset for a period, but they recovered fairly quickly. My greatest triumph was my return to CTS as Vice President of Design and Development. As a distraction from my personal struggles, I immersed myself in programming again. During my 2 difficult years, I devised an add-on for CTS's main software, allowing it to easily integrate with 2 other popular software packages from rival companies. I founded my own company and started marketing my creation. In less than a year, all 3 companies made offers to acquire my company and my software. I received $11 million for my company and an incredible compensation package from CTS. For a while, I contemplated retirement. However, with my almost non-existent social life, I was convinced that I would become a recluse if I didn't provide myself with a reason to leave the house every day. My increased income allowed me to hire a kind elderly lady who served as both a part-time housekeeper and a nanny for the kids. After a year, Mrs. Marlene Jensen became a full-time resident, staying in the guest suite above the garage in our new home. She played a grandmotherly role to my children, usually warm and gentle but firm when necessary. What I valued most was the guidance she could offer, rooted in her life experience. I cherished my children and did my best to be a supportive and caring father. However, I was also emotionally scarred and cynical. I turned to her for advice when faced with decisions. As time passed, the children grew into well-adjusted adults, and I occasionally saw them and their families. Unfortunately, our closeness dwindled over time. I held no grudges. It was better for me to keep my bitterness at bay and maintain some distance from their lives. Mrs. Jensen worked for me until the kids went off to college, and then she retired. I provided her with free accommodations and meals as her pension. She had been a constant presence in my life for 15 years. Despite her efforts to encourage me to live and find a companion, she passed away knowing that I would always be alone. I never really opened up to anyone again. My friendships remained superficial and unsatisfying. My dating life was practically non-existent, except for a few group outings arranged by casual acquaintances. I earned a well-deserved reputation as a cold-hearted, ruthless individual not to be crossed. Most people avoided me, and I couldn't blame anyone but myself. I managed my sexual needs adequately. My increasing wealth allowed me to maintain a regular rotation of call girls. I compensated them generously for their time and services, essentially having casual encounters with them before showing them the door. There was one I grew fond of for a while who went by Candy but later revealed her real name was Mary Beth. She was a passionate and willing partner, and it seemed like our connection went beyond just a client-provider relationship. However, I couldn't burden someone else with my emotional baggage, so when I sensed she was getting too attached, I ended things. As for Jennifer, she faced her own challenges in life. She made efforts to reach out to me for almost a year, though I'm not entirely sure why. Did she hope for reconciliation? Or was she seeking a relationship with my children? It's possible, but I had given her clear warnings. She attempted to remain in Chicago, so I initiated surveillance on her. Whenever she applied for a job, I ensured that her complete work history followed her. As soon as she started dating, which seemed to happen quite promptly, I sent care packages to her potential partners, providing them with all the details about the woman they were inviting into their lives. I didn't particularly care whether they chose to keep her around after learning the truth, but I wanted to ensure she couldn't evade her past by ignoring it. I had to confront it every day, so it seemed only fair that she should as well. One of her prospective partners attempted to confront me for tormenting my ex-wife. He arrived at my doorstep fueled by liquid courage and physically pushed me as I opened the front door, causing me to stumble backward. It was a grave error on his part. As I've mentioned, I'm an ordinary person with no background in martial arts or special forces training. I've never been inclined toward violence, and I've never been in a physical altercation before. However, what I possessed at that moment was an overwhelming rage, an untamed reservoir of intense hatred for my wife and her lovers. Regrettably, he became the target of my outburst. I ended up with a noticeable black eye he was fortunate to have survived. He pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and unlawful entry, receiving probation as a first-time offender. I believe the years of undergoing reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation left a lasting impact on him. Jennifer never attempted to reach out to me again. I ceased monitoring her activities after an additional year, during which she secured steady employment cleaning rooms at a highway hotel in a town approximately 700 miles away from me, deep in the backwoods of Virginia. The only other occasion I encountered her was 16 years later, at my daughter's wedding. I'm aware that my children reconnected with Jennifer several years after graduating from college, and I made no effort to hinder their search for her. The passing years hadn't been kind to her. She had put on at least 20 pounds and displayed deep wrinkles around her lips, and other noticeable signs of smoking, a recent development. All in all, she appeared aged and worn out, but beneath it all, I still recognized the woman to whom I had once given my heart. I felt nothing for her, but I recognized her. During the wedding ceremony, she sat alone in the bride section of the church, positioned near the back. Her interaction with my daughter had been brief, polite, yet reserved. She made no effort to initiate a conversation with me. Throughout the night, we remained no closer than 30 feet from each other until the end of the evening. At that point, she was waiting for a cab outside when I noticed the small gold band and tiny diamond on her left ring finger. A smile crossed my face for the first time in a while. Perhaps she had fared better than me, judging by the ring. I ambled in her direction, gazing at it for several moments. As I raised my gaze to meet her eyes, I detected a profound sadness in her expression. "Just so you know, you were the one who ruined my life first." I glanced at her left hand, and then back into her eyes. "I'm genuinely glad you found someone. I hope he brings you happiness." I briskly made my way to my car, where my driver had been waiting attentively. "Good evening, Mr. Smith. I trust you had a pleasant evening, sir. Shall we head to the club?" "It went as well as I could have expected, Jonathan. Let's go directly back to the house. I think I'd like to be alone tonight." "Certainly, sir." As we pulled away, I did my best not to look back, although I did catch her brief wave farewell. "Thank you."
Story 3.
Late one evening, I found myself in an unexpected and rather private moment, unaware of the laughter and curious eyes around me. The cause of their amusement was not my awkward position, but rather a shocking personal revelation that I was the last to discover. They found it especially entertaining that I was completely clueless about the situation unfolding around me. How could a man be unaware that his wife was cheating on him right under his nose? Colin Wilson, who claimed to have closeness with my wife, was recounting to his friend Ben Kramer how he picked up her at a party last week. It was during this conversation that I was summoned to investigate a break-in at a local art gallery. Although I was away for only about 2 hours, I returned before the evening was over. I found my wife at a table with 3 other individuals, including Colin Wilson and his boss, along with their respective spouses. My name is Brian Sexton, and I work as an insurance investigator for a renowned insurance company that specializes in high-value property clients, likely unfamiliar to most. I entered this profession straight out of college and have remained with them for over 15 years. At 37 years old, I'm in the prime of my life. My role involves investigating incidents that may result in substantial compensation claims, primarily thefts and robberies, occasionally handling car accidents involving more than one or two of our vehicles. I'm highly skilled at what I do and have established a solid reputation in my industry. I'm often contracted out to other companies, albeit at a premium. While I may need to travel frequently, it's never for an extended period. If a lengthy investigation is necessary, I have personnel who can remain on site to complete the task. I've been married to Allison for 14 years, and we have two wonderful children, Regina, age 10, and Christina, aged 8. Allison, who is a year older than me, also works at the same company as the personal secretary to Bill Quinn, the company president. Although we married before she joined the company, I encouraged her to apply for a position after she lost her previous job. Although hiring her required HR approval due to nepotism policies, they consented because of my standing within the company. Fortunately, Bill Quinn was seeking a new secretary, and Allison's extensive experience as a personal assistant at a major corporation made her an ideal candidate. After interviewing her, he immediately offered her the position as his personal secretary. The individuals I mentioned earlier, Colin Wilson and Ben Kramer, are insurance specialists who cater to large companies or individuals with significant assets. While they're not close friends, they work under Jerry Scogins, a mutual acquaintance who is also a good friend of mine. I primarily report to Bill Quinn and operate independently, though occasionally Jerry assigns me interesting tasks. I overheard a conversation a week after the party. I'd stepped into the restroom to relax for a bit when Colleen and Ben entered, seemingly disregarding the closed stall door, and began discussing the party. Colin began boasting to Ben about his recent conquest, prompting me to feel a tale of escalating discomfort in my gut, unrelated to typical cramps or sweat induced by bad fish. Ben asked Colin how he managed to seduce her, expressing surprise as he never pegged her as that type of woman. Colin explained that they did a bit of dancing and she seemed quite friendly, but when he suggested going to his office, she mentioned Brian wouldn't appreciate it. So Colin convinced her to join him for a drink at the bar. Colin went on to describe how, while Brian was occupied dancing with Judy, his secretary, he approached the bartender for a double shot and subtly swapped their drinks while Judy was engrossed in conversation. His intention was to help Judy relax so he could make advances on the dance floor. Ben questioned what Colin's plan was, considering Brian's presence, but Colin insisted he hadn't orchestrated Brian's departure, chalking it up to sheer luck. During the dance, Brian informed Judy he needed to leave briefly. Though Judy suggested he take her home first, Brian urged her to stay and have fun, promising a swift return. Although Judy wasn't thrilled, she complied, staying behind with Colin, Jerry, and his wife. Later, Colin ordered Judy another drink, secretly asking Joe to make it a double again without Judy noticing. As they continued dancing, Judy became increasingly intoxicated, clinging to Colin as he made advances. She responded with giggles and pressed against him several times. Colin thought that a few more drinks would increase his chances, so he got her another, which she quickly consumed. Unbeknownst to Judy, it was another double, and she started feeling woozy. Colin suggested they step outside for some fresh air, and Judy readily agreed. They ended up settling in the back seat of his car. She was almost unconscious, so he slid his hand under her skirt. She didn't appear to object, and even pleaded for more. He complied, and she seemed to enjoy it. He found the experience incredible. Colin expressed disbelief that Allison would engage in such behavior, considering she never seemed like someone who would cheat on her husband or be attracted to someone like him. He assured his companion that the events were genuine, mentioning a scheduled date with Allison the following Saturday when she typically went to the salon. They planned to meet and book a hotel room for the day. Colin's companion expressed envy, acknowledging Allison's attractiveness and wondering what Brian did to deserve her. He even hinted at the possibility of being introduced to Allison after Colin was finished with her. Colin responded with a non-committal perhaps and emphasized the importance of keeping their conversation confidential to avoid any complications. They both left the restroom, leaving the ME struggling to comprehend what they had heard. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Was this really happening? I started to recall that evening. It was almost 11 when I returned to the party, finding Allison seated with Colin, Julie, and Jerry Scogins. Allison didn't seem intoxicated when I joined them, chatting with Julie about the kids. Colin exchanged a few words with me, but left after a few minutes. I noticed Allison saying something to him, but I didn't think much of it. The only odd thing about that night was when we got home, Allison wanted to make love. While not entirely unusual, she typically wasn't in the mood this late. She was particularly passionate that night. Guilt. Regret. About a week elapsed after the party, and I noticed no change in Allison or her demeanor. She never mentioned my early departure from the party, or what occurred in my absence. When I inquired, she claimed to have danced with Colin and Jerry, but mostly observed. She and Julie discussed school and the kids' play, and that was all. She expressed a preference for coming home when I left, suggesting I needed to keep a closer eye on her. "Hey, hun, any plans for this Saturday? I was thinking of playing golf, if that's all right." I watched her closely for her reaction. "This Saturday, right after lunch. I'll be at the salon. It'll take me an hour, maybe an hour and a half." "Where are you headed?" "To the golf course." "So, is she really going to the salon? How does Colleen know about this if she hasn't told him? I didn't know about this either." It all felt uncomfortably real. "I'm thinking the country club. I'll see if Ben Kramer wants to join." "I think he and Jerry are idiots, don't they?" "I'm not sure. I know Jerry is, but I don't know Ben or his wife well enough to say." "Same here. Hey, what about Colin Wilson? You spoke to him at the party, right? He might want to come along?" Allison turned and gave me an odd look, pausing before responding. "Why would you want him to come? He's, pardon my language, an idiot. I had to dance with him a few times at a party, and he really creeped me out. He's still an idiot." Now I'm wondering, is she trying to dissuade me from inviting him, or is she trying to convince me she dislikes him? Either way, it's unusual for her to speak about someone like that. "Oh, I don't know much about him, but he's Ben's friend and they seem close. Maybe it's not a good idea. I'll just call Phil and Charlie. They're always up for a round." "That sounds like a better plan." "Stay clear of Colin. You don't want any trouble, all right? He's off my list now." "So, you're okay with golf?" "I'm fine with it, as long as I'll still be absent. How about dinner at the Cypress Inn restaurant afterward? I'll have a fresh haircut, and you can unwind. After golf, you can take me out and show me off. I'll drop Chrissy and Jean off at my parents'." I agreed, and we arranged to meet at home at 5:30 on Saturday to prepare. If I had been more cautious, I could have gathered enough evidence to confront her that day. It would have been fitting to lay it all out over dinner at one of the city's finest spots. The next day at work, I headed to the control room to gather some gear for tracking my wife and her lover. I decided to take one of the company's surveillance vans, leaving it in the lot until Saturday morning when I went golfing. I grabbed 2 small transmitters for her purse and car, and a GPS unit for her vehicle. It would pinpoint her exact location at any time. The van was equipped with video capabilities, but I wasn't sure how to utilize it. Since Colin mentioned a motel, filming was out of the question. Perhaps I could conceal a camera in her jacket, but only if I knew she'd wear it. I could try, but it was uncertain. With the GPS unit, I could track her movements, tapping into its signal with the van's equipment. It had local street maps, pinpointing her location within 30 meters. The audio transmitters would capture any conversations recorded within the van. All of this can be automated, so I don't even need to be present in the van. I just need to leave it about a mile away from where she was last week. My plan was to spend the rest of the week observing. I'm quite skilled at this since it's my profession. I observed Ben and Colin, but didn't notice anything unusual. Normally, I visit my wife at least once a day, but lately I've been visiting a bit more frequently. Although I hadn't seen anything suspicious yet, I decided to gather information from Ben. He explained that he was working on policies for a large factory complex, and I used to spend some time examining the site and developing contingency plans for potential disasters. This is known as risk analysis, and is part of the risk insurance process. On a particular Tuesday, I approached his desk, which was across from Colleen. He seemed deeply engrossed in his work. I greeted him and expressed my desire to review the Baxter plant plan for the day. Initially, he appeared distracted until he understood my request, after which he simply nodded and agreed, stating he was available anytime. I still needed to return to that location to take some photos. We discussed the timing, agreeing to go in about an hour. it was decided that my colleague would stop by my desk on their way. After a brief exchange, I turned the corner and noticed a smirk exchanged between Ben and Colin. They maintained their gaze on me until I was out of sight. They were intriguing individuals. I resolved that Ben would face consequences for his actions. Although he wasn't directly involved, he colluded with Colin and made disparaging remarks about my wife. He was aware of the plan and chose to witness Colin's deception, rendering him equally responsible in my perspective. An hour later, Ben arrived as arranged, and we departed in my SUV. I discreetly installed one of the small transmitters in the car console, which could record any conversation within or near the vehicle. My intention was to have a record of our private conversation. As we left the parking lot and began the 25-minute journey to Baxter, I started the conversation. I asked Ben if he had enjoyed the party from the previous week. He responded that he hadn't been present, explaining that he was away on a trip and had missed out on the festivities. I conveyed to Ben my interest in understanding what had caught his attention, particularly in light of Colin's betrayal involving my wife. I asked if that was what he had overlooked. Ben seemed taken aback by my straightforwardness and initially struggled to respond. He made a move towards the door handle, but then composed himself and met my gaze. He confessed to only knowing what Colin had relayed to him and expressed doubt about the accuracy of the information. He pondered whether Colin would invent such a narrative. I expressed skepticism about Colin fabricating such a story, but pressed Ben on how he had come to know about the situation, given his absence during the events. I mentioned hearing about his 2-hour absence, coinciding with the incidents in question. Colin had mentioned getting her intoxicated and taking her to his car. It seemed that Colin didn't have any further plans to meet up beyond what he had disclosed. Ben seemed hesitant as he recounted Colin's words, acknowledging that he was unsure about the truthfulness of the information. I sarcastically remarked on Ben's apparent loyalty and thanked him for his supposed friendship, insinuating that he was bound to inform me regardless of his intentions. Ben expressed reluctance, stating that he wouldn't wish such a situation upon me, and apologized for making me feel like a fool. He referenced Colin's claim about not being able to resist my wife. After Colleen's statement, I turned off the recorder, intending to keep our subsequent conversation off the record. I reassured Ben that as long as he followed my instructions, he would be fine, but warned him of dire consequences if he failed to comply. Ben simply nodded in agreement. Additionally, I hinted at one more matter I wished to discuss with Ben. I made it clear to Ben that Colin must remain unaware of our conversation and that he must not disclose anything to him. I emphasized the consequences of any breach of trust, including the possibility of Ben losing his job and his reputation being damaged. I reminded him that I had means of monitoring both him and Colin to detect any indiscretions. I assured Ben that I wouldn't speak to Colin or even engage with him, instructing him to continue as usual and let Colin do the talking without any interference, even if he agreed with him. Having learned the truth, I instructed Ben to heed my warnings, assuring him that everything would be fine if he followed my instructions. After that, we didn't exchange many words, spending the next 2 hours in silence. Ben fulfilled his role, and I fulfilled mine, obtaining the information I needed while ensuring Ben remained unaware for the time being. It wasn't necessary for him to know at that moment. The week felt unusually long, with me keeping a close watch on my wife, although she didn't display any unusual behavior. Wednesday evening arrived and the children went to their dance class, scheduled to conclude around 9:30. I sat in the living room watching TV when Allison joined me, settling onto my lap. She wrapped her arms around my neck, pressing her cheek against mine. "We've got about 2 hours before I need to pick up the kids. How about we make love?" Despite feeling disheartened and frustrated about the situation, I was human after all. Against my better judgment, I felt myself getting aroused. I embraced her tightly, kissing her tenderly. "Take me upstairs to our bedroom right now. I want you, and I want it now." I needed no further encouragement and followed her upstairs, admiring her figure along the way. We undressed and then engaged in passionate lovemaking. Afterwards, we lay in each other's arms for a while, content to bask in the afterglow without the need for words. It was love at its finest. For a moment, I pushed aside my doubts and fears that this might all come crashing down. I wanted to believe it was all a lie. But reality had a way of asserting itself. "That was wonderful, darling. I think we need to do this more often, don't you? We've been out of sync for a while. Let's not allow that to happen again." "Agreed. I'll make sure of it. How much time do we have? And do we have a moment for a quick shower?" "I have to pick up the kids after 9, but we can postpone if you like. Now, or should we wait until our date on Saturday night? I could ask the kids to stay at their mom's for the night." "How about this? I'm all yours for the evening. Anything else planned for Saturday?" "Okay, you've got golf, and I've got a hair appointment. Then, my love, we have our dinner date. And afterward, I'm all yours whenever you desire. And I expect plenty of that from you. Any better offers now?" "None at all." "Okay then, we're set." Allison quickly dressed and went to fetch the children. I lay there for a while, reflecting on what had just transpired. How could that woman be close with me like that if she slept with that awful Colin Wilson? I knew she was clever, but was she also a skilled actress? Something seemed off, and I was determined to uncover the truth on Saturday. While she was away, I checked the transmitters and confirmed they were working properly. My plan was to install them in her car on Friday night, and also on Percy. I had everything prepared except for one last meeting with Ben Kramer. I needed to know which hotel Colin had reserved. Ben would find out for me, or else I'd resort to less pleasant methods. The following morning, I phoned Ben and arranged to meet him in the third-floor cafeteria. He agreed, without question, and upon his arrival, I was already seated at a table. He joined me silently, and I wasted no time getting to the point. "Ben, old pal, I need you to find out from Colin where he intends to take Allison on Saturday. I need the motel's name and location. Just catch him alone and inquire. Tell him you suspect he's deceiving you, and that you'll trust him if he reveals the truth." I flashed a grin at Ben, who pondered how he'd manage my request. Fear of my reprisal weighed heavily on him. Eventually he relented, but inquired how I'd verify if he disclosed the meeting place. I assured him not to worry, I had my methods. As he departed, I embraced him, discreetly placing one of the transmitters beneath his jacket collar as a reminder of our deal. He was so intimidated that he remained oblivious, the transmitter almost imperceptible, secured with glue. Upon returning to my office, I activated the receiver and heard Ben's return to his desk, along with his conversation with Colin. Ben invited Colin to meet him in the copy room in 10 minutes, which Colin agreed to. Ben then questioned Colin about potential marital issues, to which Colin defensively claimed everything was fine, and mentioned seeing me on set the day before, apparently doing well. Doubting Colin's words, Ben pressed him about his plans with my wife for Saturday, specifically mentioning a motel. Colin insisted on his truthfulness and offered to provide proof if necessary. Colin then disclosed that he had booked a room at the Skyview Motel on Statler Street for Saturday night, with check-in at 2 p.m. and my wife arriving by 2:15 p.m. He even suggested verifying his reservation by calling the motel. After confirming the details, Colin made a remark about my wife's marriage to me and warned Ben about meddling in their affair. Despite Ben's concern, Colin remained indifferent, suggesting that if my wife was interested, so was he. I shut off the receiver after this exchange, almost inclined to believe Colin's claims. However, I hoped he would backtrack and admit to fabricating everything, which he didn't. Instead, he confirmed the details, leaving me unsettled. Nonetheless, I now had the motel address to set up the necessary equipment in the van for surveillance. I contemplated parking the van there on Friday night, activating the gear on Saturday noon, and keeping my distance to avoid witnessing my wife's betrayal. Feeling adrift, all I could do was move forward and gather evidence to confront my wife, Colin, and Ben. First, I rang the motel, and they confirmed Colin's booking. At least that part was true. Now, I just had to bide my time until Friday evening. Then an idea struck me. What if I captured them entering the motel room on camera? I resolved to visit the motel that day and explore my options. Inside the Skyview Motel office, I awaited the clerk. He seemed shady, which suited my purposes. Honesty wasn't what I needed right now. "Hello, friend. I'm an investigator for an insurance company and I need some information. I have an ID and a warrant for you," I said, swiftly flashing my badge and presenting a convincing document that resembled a search warrant. It was a forgery, but I counted on his lack of astuteness and susceptibility to deception. The slip of cash I offered didn't hurt either. "Yes, sure. What do you need?" he replied. I asked him to confirm Colin Wilson's reservation and if he had a room number. He replied in the negative, so I suggested he assign a room on the first floor overlooking Statler Street. He hesitated until I slipped him an extra $50, finally divulging a room number suitable for my filming purposes. I informed him about the van I'd park on his property, to which he shrugged and dismissed as inconsequential. I thanked him once more for his assistance and slipped him another $50 for his discretion. A sly grin crept across his face as he pocketed the bills. After I departed, I realized I could capture the footage I desired by positioning the camera through the front window of the van, parked directly outside their room. Now I'm all set. Friday at work proved challenging for me. Unsure of what to do with myself, I made my way to Bill Quinn's office, using the excuse of discussing a recent art gallery robbery, although he didn't really need the details. My true motive was to catch a glimpse of my wife. As I traversed the hallway, her face brightened upon spotting me. She waved eagerly, gesturing for me to join her at her table, and I obliged. "I've been enjoying seeing more of you lately. Not complaining, but what's changed? Anything I should know about?" she inquired. "Nothing like that from what I know. I just enjoy being around you more," I replied. "Is Bill in?" "He is. Want me to introduce you?" she offered. "Yes, if possible. I need to discuss some matters regarding the art gallery," I explained. Entering Bill's office, I engaged in conversation with him. Despite his youthfulness for a president, I knew he had garnered a strong reputation. He had spearheaded the launch and operation of various ventures, including the site I worked on, and held a substantial stake in the company. Bill had a stunning wife named Naomi, whom I'd met on several occasions. She epitomized the quintessential trophy wife, blonde, slender, irresistibly attractive. She and Allison were of similar ages and often conversed, while Bill and I had developed a close rapport. During our discussion, I directly asked Bill his opinion on Colin Wilson. As part of my duties, I regularly provided feedback on other employees' performance at Bill's behest, though this matter concerned me personally. "Why the interest in Colin? Is there something I should be aware of?" Bill inquired. "I need to ensure any potential issues with my team members are addressed promptly," I explained. "Well, I might have some concerns about Colin. I'm not particularly fond of him, and Ben, I might have more to share with you this weekend. If things go as anticipated, I'd like to touch base with you at home on Sunday if that works for you. Otherwise, we'll reconvene on Monday," Bill disclosed. "Let's wait and see. Until then, please keep this between us," I requested. "Agreed. No problem. I trust your judgment in these matters. You've always been fair in your evaluations, and I value that. However, I'd like you to consider accepting the vice president position I proposed as you requested. I haven't broached the subject with Allison yet, but she deserves to know. If you don't inform her soon, I will. I'm just waiting for the right moment. This entails significant changes for us, so I wanted some time to deliberate. I'll give you an update next week," Bill suggested. "Sounds good. I'll definitely consider it. I've been weighing my options lately, so I'll need to make a decision soon," I assured him. With my own agenda in mind, I exited Bill's office, exchanging a few words with Allison before heading toward Ben. Pausing at his desk, I made a comment loud enough for Colleen to overhear, affirming his assessment of Baxter's performance. Then, I subtly signaled to Ben that I'd overheard his conversation with Colin, prompting a surprised reaction from him, though neither of us spoke further. Patting him on the back, I discreetly removed the small transmitter, just as before, leaving him none the wiser. I wrapped up the day without any interruptions, and waited for Allison before heading home. I intended to inform her that I needed to drop off the van somewhere and would catch a taxi to my car, causing me to be a bit delayed. She bid me goodbye with a kiss and headed home. I noticed Colleen standing by the door, observing her departure. He glanced at me briefly before returning to his seat. Afterward, I parked the van, ensured the camera was positioned correctly to capture the designated room the clerk had assigned, and secured it. I reminded the motel owner that I needed to leave it there overnight, perhaps until the following day. Slipping him an extra $20, I thanked him for his cooperation. He pocketed the money and shook my hand. With that settled, I headed home. Friday night at home brought another surprise. Allison ordered pizza for the kids and arranged for them to spend the evening at Grandma's. When I inquired why, she explained that she enjoyed our Wednesday night so much that she wanted to continue the trend tonight. Did I mind? Not at all. Friday night unfolded similarly to Wednesday with a new twist. Although I found enjoyment in the experience, a sickening feeling crept over me as I pondered where she might have learned these new techniques. However, when I later questioned her about it, she giggled and retrieved a book from her nightstand, showing me an article about lovemaking after 35. Much of what we had been doing for the past 2 nights was outlined in that article. I found pleasure in our activities that night, striving to fulfill her desires. It took up most of the night, but I didn't mind. I resolved to take Viagra in the future. As we lay beside each other, I finally mustered the courage to inquire about the source of her newfound enthusiasm. "Allison, I love what we've been doing and I want to please you, but I have to ask, where is all of this coming from? Why now? If I didn't trust you so much, I'd wonder if there might be a guilty conscience involved." "Sorry, Bree. Naomi shared something with me last week that I can't repeat. I've been reflecting on our life together, and it fills me with happiness. Sometimes, I just need to express that joy. I chose this path to show you how much you mean to me." I listened, watching her happiness with a mixture of emotions. Yet, I couldn't shake the thought. If this is true, how could she be having an affair? Should I confront her? "I'm glad you feel that way. Are you sure I make you happy enough? Are you satisfied with our closeness? Or do you feel something is missing, prompting these new endeavors? Please, be honest." "I adore our closeness, and you've always fulfilled me completely. I have no desire for more, but I don't want us to fall into a routine where our passion fades into monotony. Can't you see? Don't you want me to always feel desired by you? You'll never have to worry about that. I love you and always will. I can't imagine anything jeopardizing what we have." That's reassuring because I won't allow it. We spent the remainder of the night wrapped in each other's arms, waking up the same way. Though pleasantly exhausted, I wanted to shower with Allison. I roused her and pulled her into the shower with me. Initially protesting, she eventually joined me under the water's spray, and we lovingly attended to each other's needs. Soon we both became aroused and pleasured each other. When I inquired, she mentioned she was ready for the day, but anticipated something more that night. With that, we finished our shower, got dressed early, and I drove to the motel to ensure everything was prepared. I programmed all the timers to activate at 1 p.m. and ensured the audio recording would last a minimum of 5 hours. The video footage was burned onto a DVD, a process that would take around 7 hours after compression. This would cover the entire day. I initiated the sequences and locked up the van. When these two lovers entered their sanctuary, they would become the stars of my new film, and the initial screening would make quite an impact on everyone involved. Returning home to grab my golf clubs and bid my beloved wife farewell, the day proved terrible regardless. I played golf with 2 acquaintances from the club, and if my performance was any indication, they likely believed my club membership was a waste of money. I ended up buying beer for all of us, feeling like a complete failure. Around 5, I drove to the van to ensure everything was in order. Scanning the area, I didn't spot any cars or activity, assuming everyone had already departed. Quickly calling my home phone, Allison answered, and I simply informed her I was on my way before hanging up. With the meeting time with Allison drawing near, I drove home without reviewing the collected information. I was eager to have it before dinner, but then I reconsidered our planned evening. Why not savor what she offered one last time? Despite the betrayal, I still enjoyed making love to her. However, I found myself choking up again. Why was she doing this to me? I loved her deeply, and the thought of living without her seemed unbearable. I knew that if the evidence on the surveillance tapes confirmed my suspicions, divorce would be inevitable. Though I loved her, her behavior was unacceptable. But what about the children? She was a devoted mother and deserved custody. If she had indeed cheated, there must have been a reason unknown to me. She was fundamentally good, but had made a grave mistake. I could come to terms with that. She could care for the children, and I would provide child support. These thoughts consumed me as I drove home to reunite with my wife. Uncertain if I could endure the evening, I knew I had to try. Legal action couldn't be taken until I had concrete evidence. Yet, a small voice in the back of my mind persisted, casting doubt on all the information gathered thus far. I brushed it aside. Facts were facts, and soon I would have all the evidence I needed. At home, Allison had already showered and dressed, mentioning she would add the finishing touches when it was time to leave. Meanwhile, I hurried to get ready, ensuring we left on time to make our reservation. My wife was radiant, always drawing attention as we entered the room. She was accustomed to the admiring glances of men, which she effortlessly brushed off. Yet, I couldn't help but notice, and it always filled me with pride. Tonight served as a stark reminder of what could have transpired. Despite this, she remained intelligent and engaging, making for an excellent dinner companion. We conversed on various topics typical of spouses enjoying a night out, and she seemed to indulge in more wine than usual, given my role as the designated driver. It felt as though she was particularly flirtatious with me, her husband. As we concluded our dessert of chocolate mousse, preceded by sorbet, we exchanged smiles. Both of us were eager to retire to the bedroom upon returning home that evening. I signaled to the waiter for the bill as Allison excused herself to the restroom. Exiting hand in hand, we made our way to the car. As I navigated onto the main street towards our house, Allison leaned against my shoulder, intertwining our fingers. She gently moved my hand from the steering wheel to my lap, and without much prompting, I enveloped her in a hug reminiscent of our youthful love. She sighed contentedly, and we drove home in this love-making embrace. Once home, Allison busied herself with household tasks, until finally turning to me. "Shouldn't we head upstairs and pick up where we left off this morning? You owe me something, since you only gave me a down payment earlier, remember?" "I do. Lead the way and I'll follow." We ascended to the bedroom swiftly, where Allison stood before the bed. I stripped down to my boxers and socks while she removed her top and bra, leaving only a strand of pearls around her neck. As she reached to remove them, I halted her hand. "Leave them be. You look incredibly hot standing there with nothing but those pearls. You're stunningly beautiful. This is a sight only I will see. I am completely yours, and I want you to do as you please with me. I want this night to mark the beginning of a lifetime together. Are you certain is this what you desire? I wouldn't want to do anything to cause you pain or embarrassment. You should know that I trust you entirely and offer myself completely to you. I love you with all my heart." In that moment, I believed her, knowing that regardless of what I discovered the next day, I would never give up on her. I decided to postpone any further thoughts until tomorrow. Tonight, I would love this woman with all my heart. That night, we explored new realms of closeness, trying positions I never imagined and experiencing things I never thought possible. At times, she would laugh and cite a page number when I inquired about her fantasy, yet it was a magical night, a night where I learned to love conversation, giving and receiving in equal measure. What a night it was! We fell asleep in each other's arms, waking late Sunday morning. Reluctant to rise, she agreed to one more encore of our favorite moments from the night before. Afterwards, she had to pick up the girls for Sunday, and I mentioned the need to swiftly check on the van. She suggested she might stay at her mom's for a while before returning. This afforded me the opportunity to retrieve the tapes from the van and inspect their contents. I still had to check what I left in her purse and car, but that could wait. She departed, and I drove to the van, retrieving all the films and prints without issue before returning the van to the production facility. I called a taxi to pick me up and transport me back to my car, then headed home. The first step I took was to examine the GPS printout. She had confirmed her car's location on Statler Street, where the motel stood, and at that moment, my heart nearly ceased beating. Though I hoped against hope, it seemed my fears had materialized. Despite almost deciding not to proceed further, I felt compelled to view the video firsthand. I switched on the TV and DVD player, inserting the DVD, preparing myself for heartbreak. The image was crystal clear, the room perfectly centered on the screen. I fast-forwarded until I spotted a car approaching, then slowed to normal speed. Colin Wilson emerged from the car, opened the room's door, and disappeared inside. Rewinding, another car appeared, and I witnessed a woman approaching, knocking on the door, and being greeted by Colin's smile as she entered the room. When she turned, revealing her face, my heart raced, and my pulse skyrocketed. Pausing the video, I watched it from start to finish before removing it. "Well, I'll be damned," I muttered to myself. I needed to contact Bill Quinn immediately. There was one address I had to verify, so I retrieved my wife's address book from my desk drawer. As anticipated, the address I sought was there, confirming my suspicions. A smile crept onto my face. With all the necessary information in hand, I dialed Bill's home number. Urging him to meet me immediately, he initially insisted I come to his house, but I persuaded him to meet me alone elsewhere. Eventually, we agreed to rendezvous at the TGIF restaurant near the office. An hour later, we met there. Allison and the girls had plans for dinner at her mom's, affording me the time I needed. At TGIF, I briefed Bill before revealing the DVD. I brought along a portable player with a 9-inch screen and headphones for privacy. As he listened, his anger simmered beneath the surface. Initially skeptical, he vehemently denied the possibility of Allison's involvement. However, as I played the recording of Ben's encounter with Colin and laid out the entire narrative, implicating both Ben and Colin, Bill's complexion turned crimson with rage. Despite his personal regard for Allison, he gradually accepted the truth. I advised him to watch the DVD before passing further judgment. As Bill viewed the footage, his countenance fell, evident pain etched across his face. Sensing his need for privacy, I looked away, allowing him to process. When he finished, he met my gaze, and I waited for his response. Once composed, I made my sole request. I want them both terminated for breaching the moral clause in their contracts, effective by Monday afternoon. With the evidence I've provided, you have the authority to act as you see fit. I won't mention this again. Bill's surprise shifted into a smile. It was reassuring to witness. I aim to involve him in this matter only as much as necessary. You have my word that this will be handled first thing Monday, and I'll personally escort them off the premises. They're dead to me. There may be further action I'll take, but it's best you don't know the details. Understood. Agreed. Following that, I handed him a bag containing all the surveillance data, except for one small cassette, which I retained for my own purposes. It was necessary for my plans regarding my wife. Bill and I continued our discussion for another hour or so, making additional decisions to address later in the week. We parted ways with a handshake, and before I left, Bill addressed me once more. Brian, you're a good and honorable person. I appreciate what you've done and respect your actions in handling this matter. Things could have escalated if you were less level-headed. You have my gratitude and respect. I felt a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in some time as I headed home to my family, who remained unaware of the impending changes. That evening at home went smoothly and my spirits were high. Allison was curious about what had transpired, but I told her she'd learn more at work the next day. Exhausted from the previous nights, we retired early for a peaceful night's sleep. Allison wanted to be embraced, and I gladly obliged. We fell asleep in each other's arms. Just like the previous night, Monday at work was bustling with activity. Allison called me at 9:30 to update me on the situation. I pretended to be clueless and asked for details. She informed me that Bill had summoned Ben Kramer and Colin Wilson to his office immediately. They were currently present and tensions were high. I professed confusion and requested further updates. 20 minutes later, Allison called again, reporting that Bill had instructed her to contact security urgently. She discreetly handled the call at her desk before informing me that Bill had directed security to escort Ben and Colin back to their workstations. She hastily ended the call, promising to update me later. An hour passed, with no word until Allison finally phoned to reveal that both Ben and Colin had been terminated, with Bill requesting her to draft disciplinary letters citing a breach of the morals clause. She was exhilarated, deeming it the most unusual event during her tenure as Bill's secretary. She insisted we grab lunch together to discuss it, and I agreed. Over lunch, Allison recounted the events of the morning in detail. She described the escorting of Ben and Colin out of the building and the warning to never return. She mentioned Bill's evident agitation, even recounting a moment when he momentarily snapped at her before apologizing. Eventually, she turned to me, seeking insight. How would I know about this? Bill instructed me to ask you. When I pressed him, he simply said, "Ask Brian, he's aware of everything and opened my eyes to a lot. So, spill it. Before I divulge anything, I want you to listen to this tape first." I handed her a cassette of Ben and Colin's conversation about the motel. She listened intently, her expression turning pale as she reached the end. Removing her headphones indignantly, she exclaimed, "This is absurd. It's a lie. I never went to any motel with him, and I never would. You can't trust this recording. Did you show this to Bill? Does he believe this nonsense too? No, he doesn't believe Colin, and neither do I. I have something to explain, and I expect you to listen attentively without interruption." When I expressed skepticism about the tape, Allison eased slightly, though she remained angry and somewhat apprehensive. She nodded for me to continue. "I overheard Ben and Colin talking about a week ago," I began. Colin boasted to Ben about an encounter between you and him at a party. He claimed he got you intoxicated and then took you to his car, where you engaged in lovemaking activity in the back seat. He provided explicit details of the incident to Ben, who seemed convinced by his account. In fact, Ben was so impressed that he wanted to be involved in the next rendezvous. Confused, I sought confirmation of the truth. Allison attempted to interject, but I persisted, needing to uncover the reality swiftly before it escalated. I instructed Ben to confront Colin, who admitted to booking a motel room on Statler Street for Saturday afternoon, coinciding with your supposed hair appointment, I continued. This raised alarms, as I couldn't understand how he knew about your hair appointment unless you had informed him. Remember, I mentioned our plans for Saturday evening to you? Despite this, he never showed up. Determined to verify your involvement, I utilized a company surveillance van to monitor your car and record anyone entering the motel room. After obtaining the room number from the receptionist, I arranged to review the footage on Sunday. Subsequently, I contacted Bill and provided him with all the evidence, resulting in Ben and Colin's termination at my behest. As I recounted the events to Allison, she remained bewildered and adamantly denied being at the motel with Colin. "But I wasn't with him. I was at the salon as I told you," she protested. "My salon is indeed on Statler Street, but I had no knowledge of any motel rendezvous. You don't believe me. I know who he was with because she confessed it to me herself." Cutting her off, I pressed on, needing to reassure her of my trust. "I don't believe that, but I trust you implicitly," I affirmed. "Let me explain. I received footage of Colin's encounter that day, and indeed a woman visited him as he claimed. This woman was none other than Bill's wife, Naomi. My suspicions were initially aroused after a conversation with Jerry Scogins a few days prior. When Colin alleged he took you to his car that night, I inquired with Jerry if you were intoxicated. He chuckled, revealing that you and his wife had only consumed soft drinks that evening and were inseparable. He even mentioned how you asked her to remain by your side to deter Colin from asking her to dance, indicating your lack of interest in him. When I asked if Colin ever suggested stepping outside for some air, Jerry simply laughed, implying he had nothing to say. "So did you truly doubt me? Did you orchestrate this surveillance to spy on me? I'm troubled by this lack of trust, especially after our evenings together on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. Of course, I believed in you, but Colin's fabrication left me with doubts. I suspected he was diverting Ben's attention away from his true companion. Uncertain of her identity, I had to uncover the truth, though I wish it hadn't implicated Bill's wife. He was utterly devastated." We conversed further before reluctantly returning from our lunch break. Allison accepted my explanation regarding my inquiry into Colin's companion, and I left her to her thoughts. Though I harbored some doubts, I felt no regret in uncovering the truth. Our relationship was now stable, and I was determined to maintain that. Work had settled by then, but Allison informed me that Bill requested to speak with her. Later that evening, I mentioned that I was unaware of the details, and she seemed to believe me. I received no further updates until we sat down for dinner at home. Amidst the girls' usual flurry of activities, we found a moment of peace, during which Allison shared Bill's conversation with her. He spoke about the importance of having a husband like you, emphasizing trust, respect, and love, and the devastation of losing it all, she recounted. Then he confided in me about Naomi's actions and sought my counsel. "And what advice did you offer him? Were you able to assist?" I refrained from dictating his actions. Instead, I encouraged him to reflect on his love for Naomi and consider forgiveness, if feasible. I urged him to engage in a candid conversation with her, but also cautioned against prolonging the decision if reconciliation seemed improbable. He seemed receptive to my words, so perhaps I made a difference. "I'm certain you did. Did he mention anything about me?" "No, nothing further. Is there something else on your mind?" "Well, yes, Bill extended an offer for me to assume the role of Vice President of Investigations for the corporation. It entails overseeing all investigators worldwide and offers the flexibility to choose our place of residence, potentially in California or Florida. Although I would still report to Bill, this would come with substantial financial rewards and benefits, including shares." Allison's excitement was palpable as she leaped into my arms, overwhelmed with joy. "When did this happen? Is it in recognition of your actions today? Is it a sort of reward?" she exclaimed. Now who's doubting whom? Bill proposed this to me 6 months ago, but I wasn't ready to consider it until now. The prospect of losing everything I've built made the decision more tangible. Last week I feared I might have lost you, and it prompted me to reevaluate, I explained. Brian, you could never lose me like that. I won't stray ever. It's out of the question, and you mustn't think otherwise. Do you understand? Never again, she affirmed, holding me tightly.
Story 4.
Mark stared at his wedding photo, the silver frame catching the late afternoon light streaming through his home office window. In the image, he and Emily beamed at each other, young and in love, their whole lives ahead of them. 8 years had passed since that day, but it felt like a lifetime ago that he set the frame face down on his desk, a gesture that had become habit over the past few months. The happy couple in that photo no longer existed. In their place were two strangers sharing a house. Their conversations reduced to mundane discussions about bills and schedules. The sound of the garage door opening pulled him from his thoughts. Emily was home early for once. Mark checked his watch 6:30 p.m. She usually didn't return until well after 8 these days. He listened to her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, tracking her movement through the house. Emily, he called out. The footsteps paused. Yes, I was thinking we could order from that new Thai place tonight. Have dinner together? A lengthy silence followed. I already ate at the office. The Morgan account is keeping us busy. Of course it was. The Morgan account had become her universal excuse. Mark pushed back from his desk, walking to the kitchen where Emily stood checking the mail. Her designer blazer was still crisp despite the long day, not a hair out of place in her carefully styled bob. The Morgan account, he repeated. Funny how one client can consume so much time. Emily's shoulders tensed slightly. It's a major deal, Mark. You know how important this is for the firm. More important than your marriage. She slammed the mail down on the counter. Don't start. I'm not in the mood for another lecture about how I'm never home. When was the last time we had dinner together? Or watched a movie? Or did anything as a couple? I don't keep track. Emily brushed past him, heading for the stairs. And I don't appreciate being ambushed the moment I walk in the door. Mark followed her. It's ambushing now? To want to spend time with my wife? This is exactly why I work late. She spun to face him halfway up the stairs. Every time I'm home, you're suffocating me with demands for attention. I need space, Mark. I need time to focus on my career. Your career? He laughed bitterly. Is that what you call those late-night strategy sessions? Emily's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Just wondering why strategy requires so many dinner meetings, and weekend conferences, and late-night calls in the bathroom when you think I'm asleep. Are you spying on me? I'm observing my wife pulling away from me. There's a difference. Emily descended a few steps until they were eye level. Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. My work is important to me. If you can't handle having a successful wife who doesn't run every decision by you, that's your problem, not mine. This isn't about success, Mark said quietly. This is about respect, honesty. Remember those wedding vows we took? The ones about honoring each other? Oh, for God's sake. Emily threw up her hands. I'm going to take a shower. When I come out, I expect this interrogation to be over. She stormed up the stairs, leaving Mark standing there, his hands clenched in fists at his sides. The shower started running moments later, and with it came a familiar sound, the soft ding of Emily's phone receiving a message. Mark looked up the stairs, listening to the water run. The phone would be in her blazer pocket, probably tossed on the bathroom counter. It had been weeks since he'd last checked it, promising himself he wouldn't become the paranoid, suspicious husband, but as he climbed the stairs, his footsteps silent against the carpet, he knew that paranoia had nothing to do with it. The signs were all there: the late nights, the defensive behavior, the constant phone checks. He wasn't imagining the distance growing between them. He wasn't inventing the way she recoiled from his touch, or how she always seemed to be texting someone when she thought he wasn't looking. The bathroom door was closed, steam seeping out beneath it. Emily's blazer lay draped over the hallway chair, her phone visible in the pocket. Mark's heart pounded as he reached for it. This was the moment he could either remain in denial, or he could face whatever truth lay behind that locked screen. The phone felt heavy in his hand as he returned to their bedroom. Emily had never changed the password from their anniversary date. For digits that once represented their love, now about to reveal its destruction, his fingers trembled as he typed in the numbers. 1-0-2-2 that the screen unlocked, revealing a message preview that made his blood run cold. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to taste you again. Mark sank onto the bed, his world tilting on its axis. In that moment, as the shower continued to run and his wife hummed tunelessly behind the bathroom door, he began to understand that everything he thought he knew about his marriage had been a lie, and this was just the beginning. For the next week, Mark lived in a state of controlled fury. Each morning, he kissed Emily goodbye as if nothing had changed. Each evening, he watched her leave for her late meetings, knowing exactly where she was going and with whom. The messages on her phone had told him everything. Jacob, a client from her firm, or so she claimed in their texts. Their affair had been going on for 6 months, their rendezvous carefully planned around Mark's schedule. They met at high-end hotels, restaurants where Mark would never think to look, and sometimes the thought made his stomach turn. In Jacob's downtown apartment, Mark sat in his home office, scrolling through the screenshots he'd taken of their conversations. He'd created a detailed timeline of their affair, each date and location meticulously documented. The evidence was damning. But it wasn't just the physical betrayal that cut him to the core. It was the way they talked about him. Poor Mark, Emily had written. He actually suggested couples therapy today, as if talking about our feelings would make me want him again. Jacob's response had been cruel. Some men just don't get it. They think being nice and reliable is enough. But you need more than that. Don't you, baby? So much more, Emily had replied. Things I could never do with him. He's too vanilla. Too safe. Mark's computer screen cracked under his grip. He forced himself to relax his fingers, taking deep breaths. He wouldn't let anger cloud his judgment. Not now. Not when he needed to think clearly. The front door opened downstairs. Emily's voice drifted up, speaking softly into her phone. Mark opened a new browser tab, hiding the evidence of his discovery. "I'll call you back," she said as she passed his office. "Yes, tomorrow same time." "I know. I miss you too." Mark's jaw clenched. He wondered if Jacob knew that Emily used the same lines on him that she'd once used with Mark. If he realized he wasn't special, just the newest player in her game. "Hey." Emily appeared in his doorway, wearing a new dress he hadn't seen before. "I'm going to that conference this weekend, remember? The one downtown." Mark nodded, maintaining his facade of ignorance. "Right? The marketing summit. I'll be gone Friday through Sunday. Try not to miss me too much." She attempted a playful smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Which hotel is it at again?" "The Marriott." The lie came easily to her lips. "They're hosting all the keynote speakers there." Mark pulled up the Marriott's website. "Funny, I don't see any marketing events listed for this weekend." Emily's smile faltered. "It's a private conference. Industry professionals only." "Of course." Mark turned back to his computer. "Have fun with Jacob." The silence that followed was deafening. Mark could hear Emily's sharp intake of breath, could practically feel her mind racing for a denial. "What did you say?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. Mark swiveled his chair to face her. "Jacob, your client. The one you've been fucking for the past 6 months. Have fun with him this weekend." All color drained from Emily's face. "You've been spying on me?" "Spying?" Mark laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "I didn't need to spy, Emily. You got sloppy. Left your phone unlocked. Left your email logged in. Left breadcrumbs any idiot could follow. You had no right, no right?" Mark stood so quickly his chair slammed into the wall. "I'm your husband. I had every right to know you were making a fool of me." Emily stepped back, but her chin lifted defiantly. "Fine. Yes, I'm seeing Jacob. Are you happy now? Is that what you wanted to hear?" "What I want to hear is why. Why him? Why throw away 8 years of marriage? Because he makes me feel alive." Emily's voice rose, filling the office. "Because when I'm with him, I'm not just someone's wife. I'm not trapped in this suburban prison. Playing house with a man who thinks date night at Olive Garden is exciting." Mark absorbed each word like a physical blow, but he refused to show weakness. "So I'm boring? Too safe? Not enough of a man for you? You want the truth?" "No, you're not." Emily's words dripped with contempt. "Jacob gives me things you never could. Makes me feel things you never did. Like what? Anal sex. Mark watched her flinch at his crude words. Oh yes, I read all about that. How you begged him for it. Funny, considering how many times you told me it was disgusting when I suggested it. Emily's face flushed red. You're just proving my point. Look at you, acting like a wounded little boy because your wife found someone better. Better? Mark's voice was ice. A man who sleeps with married women is better. At least he's not weak. Emily spat. At least he takes what he wants instead of begging for scraps of attention. Mark moved closer, watching her retreat until her back hit the doorframe. You think I'm weak, Emily? You think I'm just going to roll over and accept this? What are you going to do? She sneered, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. Cry? Beg me to go to counseling? Face it, Mark. You're not enough for me anymore. You never were. The last thread of hope, of possible reconciliation, snapped inside Mark's chest. He stepped back, his expression hardening into something Emily had never seen before. Get out. Emily blinked. What? Get your things and get out of my bedroom. Sleep in the guest room, the couch, your car, I don't care. But you don't get to fuck another man and sleep in my bed. This is my house too, not for long. Mark's voice was deadly calm. You want Jacob so badly? Go to him. But don't expect anything from me anymore. No support, no help, no friendship. As far as I'm concerned, you're already dead to me. Emily stared at him, seemingly thrown by this new, cold version of her husband. Finally, she straightened her spine. Fine, I'll sleep in the guest room. But don't think this little display of backbone changes anything. You'll get over this, Mark. You always do. Because that's what weak men do, they forgive and forget. She turned on her heel, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Mark waited until he heard the guest room door close before returning to his computer, opening a new email account under a false name. He began forwarding himself every message, every photo, every piece of evidence he'd gathered. Emily thought she knew him, thought she could predict his reactions. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning dawned gray and cold, matching Mark's mood as he methodically stripped their bedroom. Every trace of Emily, her clothes, her jewelry, her precious collection of scented lotions he boxed and moved to the guest room while she was at work. Her protests upon returning home fell on deaf ears. This is childish, she snapped, watching him remove her photos from the walls. You're acting like a teenager. Mark continued his task without acknowledging her. Each item he removed felt like excising a tumor, cutting away the diseased parts of his life. Emily eventually stormed off, the guest room door slamming behind her late that night. As Emily slept, Mark began laying the groundwork for his response to her betrayal. His laptop screen cast a blue glow across his face as he worked, creating new email accounts, documenting timestamps, saving screenshots. Every message between Emily and Jacob was carefully cataloged and backed up to secure cloud storage. The evidence painted a devastating picture. Not only had Emily been physically unfaithful, but she'd shared intimate details of their marriage with Jacob. Their private struggles, Mark's insecurities, even their financial situations, all had become fodder for their cruel amusement. He actually cried during couples counseling. Emily had written in one message. Can you believe it? Talking about how he misses our emotional connection. God, it was pathetic. Jacob's response had been equally cutting. Sounds like someone needs his balls back. Good thing you found a real man. Mark's fingers tightened on his mouse, but he forced himself to continue reading. Each message strengthened his resolve, hardening his heart against any remaining sympathy for his wife. The next day, while Emily was at her conference with Jacob, Mark visited his bank. The teller's eyebrows rose as he transferred half of their joint savings into a private account, but she completed the transaction without comment. Will there be anything else, Mr. Harrison? Yes. Mark pulled out his phone, showing her the text messages he discovered. I'd like to document that this transfer was made after discovering my wife's infidelity. For the divorce proceedings, the teller's professional smile softened with understanding. She carefully noted the date and time of the transfer, adding her own signature as witness to his statement back home. Mark contacted a divorce lawyer, one specifically recommended for handling cases involving infidelity. The lawyer's response was swift and professional. Document everything. Every message, every receipt, every unexplained absence. The more evidence we have, the stronger our position. Mark smiled grimly. Evidence was something he had in abundance. When Emily returned Sunday evening, she found Mark watching television in the living room, apparently absorbed in a basketball game. "If you're ready to discuss this rationally," she began, her tone dripping with condescension. "Nothing to discuss." Mark didn't look away from the screen. "You've made your feelings quite clear." Emily shifted uncomfortably, thrown by his indifference. "So that's it? You're just going to ignore me?" "No, Emily." He finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I'm going to do much worse than that. I'm going to show you exactly how weak I am." She scoffed, but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "Is that supposed to be threatening?" "Not at all." Mark smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Just a promise." Emily opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Something in his tone made her uneasy. Without another word, she retreated to the guest room. Mark returned his attention to the television, but his mind was already racing with plans. Emily had destroyed their marriage, thinking him too weak to retaliate. She burned down 8 years of trust and commitment for a few thrills with Jacob. Now he would burn down her entire world. Starting with the carefully constructed lies she'd built around her affair, that as midnight approached, Mark began phase 1 of his plan. He created a detailed spreadsheet of Emily's schedule over the past 6 months, cross-referencing her work commitments with the hotel receipts he'd found in her email. The pattern was obvious. Every conference and late meeting corresponded with a hotel booking or a dinner reservation for 2. He also discovered something that made his blood boil. Emily had been using their joint credit card for some of these rendezvous. Dinner dates at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways at luxury hotels, all charged to the account they shared. She'd been funding her affair with their money. Mark documented every charge, every receipt. Each piece of evidence was another nail in the coffin of their marriage. But it wasn't enough to simply leave her. No, Emily had done more than betray their vows. She'd humiliated him, mocked him, treated his love and loyalty as weaknesses to be exploited. His laptop pinged with a new email notification. The divorce lawyer had sent over preliminary paperwork, along with a strategy for handling the division of assets. Mark read through it carefully, noting how his documented evidence of Emily's infidelity would strengthen his position. The house creaked and settled around him as he worked through the night. From the guest room came the occasional sound of Emily's phone chiming, no doubt more messages from Jacob. Let them plot and plan, Mark thought. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. By dawn, Mark had compiled a devastating dossier of Emily's betrayal. Every message, every photo, every receipt, all organized and backed up in multiple locations. But this was just the beginning. Emily thought she knew him, thought she could predict his reactions based on 8 years of marriage. She was about to learn how wrong she was. As the first rays of sunlight crept through his office window, Mark finally closed his laptop. The man who had begged for his wife's attention, who had suggested couples therapy and date nights, who had tried desperately to save his marriage, that man was gone. In his place was someone Emily wouldn't recognize. Someone who would show her exactly how much damage a weak man could do when pushed too far. Mark stood, stretching his stiff muscles, and walked to the window. The neighborhood was coming alive with early morning activity: joggers, dog walkers, people leaving for work, all going about their normal routines, unaware that behind the perfectly maintained facade of the Harrison home, a war was about to begin. Emily had traded 8 years of marriage for 6 months of thrills. Now she would learn the true cost of that decision, and by the time Mark was finished, she would understand exactly how badly she had underestimated her husband. Mark sat in his parked car outside Jacob's downtown apartment building, his hands steady on the steering wheel as he watched people enter and exit through the glass doors. 3 weeks of methodical research had led him to this moment. Jacob lived in Unit 1103. Information Mark had gleaned from Emily's text messages detailing her visits. His phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Working late again." "Don't wait up." Mark's lip curled as he typed a response. "No problem. Take care." The casual exchange was part of his carefully crafted facade. For the past weeks, he played the role of the defeated husband perfectly, acting as though he'd accepted Emily's affair. He'd even started leaving the house during her late nights, pretending to visit friends or go to the gym. In reality, he was building a comprehensive profile of both Emily and Jacob's routines that a familiar figure emerged from the building: Jacob himself, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed new money. Mark's fingers tightened on the wheel as he watched the man who destroyed his marriage stroll to his BMW, probably heading to meet Emily. "Enjoy it while it lasts," Mark muttered, pulling out his notebook. He added another entry to his growing list of observations: 6:45 p.m., leaves apartment. Gray suit, BMW heading east, dinner with Emily. The notebook contained weeks of similar entries. Jacob's schedule was surprisingly predictable. Gym every morning at 5:30 a.m., office by 8 o'clock, lunch at the same 3 restaurants, drinks with colleagues on Thursdays. The man was a creature of habit, a weakness Mark intended to exploit. His phone rang, displaying Emily's number. Mark answered, keeping his voice neutral. "Hey," Emily said, sounding slightly breathless. "I forgot to mention I have that marketing conference next weekend. The one in Chicago." Mark allowed himself a small smile. Another lie. He'd already found the hotel reservation Jacob had made for them right here in the city. "Sure," he replied. "How long will you be gone?" "Just Friday through Sunday. The firm's covering everything." "I'm sure they are." Mark watched as Jacob's BMW turned onto the main street. "Have a good time?" "That's it." Emily's voice held a note of suspicion. "No questions? No accusations? Would it change anything if I did?" A pause. "No, I suppose not." "Then why waste the energy?" Mark kept his tone deliberately flat. "You're going to do what you want anyway." "Mark," Emily hesitated. "I know this is hard, but I appreciate how you're handling it. Being mature about everything." The sheer audacity of her statement made his blood boil, but his voice remained steady. "Goodbye, Emily." He ended the call and started his car, following Jacob's BMW at a safe distance. The evening traffic provided perfect cover as he tracked his quarry through the city streets. That Jacob's car finally pulled into the parking lot of La Maison, an upscale French restaurant. Minutes later, Emily's Audi joined it. Mark parked across the street, watching as the lovers met at the entrance. Exchanging a kiss that made his stomach turn, taking out his camera, Mark captured several clear shots of their greeting. More evidence for his growing collection. But simple documentation wasn't enough anymore. He needed to understand his targets completely, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their pressure points. His phone buzzed with an email notification. His private investigator had come through with detailed background information on Jacob. Mark opened the file, scanning through the contents. Jacob Mitchell, age 36, occupation senior investment manager at Riverside Capital, marital status divorced, 2 years, criminal record, none, financial status high income, significant debt, current address 1103 The Grand, downtown, notable, former gambling addiction, multiple casino debts, cleared 3 years ago. Mark's eyes narrowed at the last detail. A recovered gambling addict with a taste for luxury and married women. How interesting. He wondered if Emily knew about Jacob's past or if she cared. In her blind pursuit of excitement, she'd latched onto a man whose carefully polished exterior masked significant flaws. The sound of laughter drew his attention back to the restaurant window. Emily was touching Jacob's arm, smiling in a way she hadn't smiled at Mark in years. The sight should have hurt, but Mark felt only cold determination. Let them laugh. Let them think they were untouchable in their little bubble of adultery and deceit, that he had plans for both of them. Mark's phone chimed with another email, this time from his lawyer. The divorce paperwork was ready, but Mark had asked him to hold off filing. He wanted everything in place before he made his move. Emily thought she'd broken him, reduced him to a passive observer of his own humiliation. She would learn differently. Very differently. Opening his notebook again, Mark began sketching out the next phase of his plan. He had Jacob's schedule, his weaknesses, his pressure points. Now it was time to use them. The man's gambling history was particularly intriguing. Recovered addicts often carried deep fears about their past being exposed, especially in professional settings. The darkness fell over the city. Mark watched Emily and Jacob enjoy their expensive dinner, paid for with his money. Soon they would discover the true cost of their affair. But not yet. For now, he would continue watching, learning, planning. After all, revenge, like fine wine, required careful preparation. Mark's office computer pinged with an incoming email from Emily's company server. His anonymous tip about workplace harassment had prompted an internal investigation, exactly as planned. The HR director's response was everything he'd hoped for. "Thank you for bringing these concerns to our attention. We take allegations of inappropriate relationships between employees and clients very seriously. Rest assured, this matter will be handled with utmost discretion." A quiet knock on his office door interrupted his reading. "Come in." Emily entered, her usual confidence notably diminished. "We need to talk." "About?" Mark continued typing, not bothering to look up. "Someone at work." She closed the door behind her. "Someone sent photos to HR. Of me and Jacob." Now Mark did look up, his expression carefully neutral. "Really? How unfortunate." "This isn't funny, Mark." Emily paced the small office. "They're launching an investigation. I could lose my job." "Sounds serious. Maybe you should have thought about that before fucking a client." Emily's face flushed with anger. "Did you do this? Are you the one who sent those photos? Would it matter if I did? God, I knew you were pathetic. But this..." She leaned over his desk. "Trying to get me fired because I found someone better?" Mark stood slowly, meeting her glare. "Better? Let's talk about better. Emily. Let's talk about Jacob Mitchell, the gambling addict who's drowning in debt. The man who's been sued twice by former business partners. That's your better option?" Emily's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, didn't Loverboy tell you about his past? About the millions he lost at casinos? The loans he's still paying off?" Mark pulled out a file and tossed it on the desk. "Did he mention he's been sleeping with his secretary too? Or did you think you were special?" "You're lying." But uncertainty crept into her voice. "Jacob would have told me, like you told me about him." Mark's laugh was cold. "Face it, Emily. You threw away 8 years of marriage for a man who's just as much a liar as you are." Emily snatched up the file, flipping through the pages. Her hands trembled as she read the private investigator's report, complete with photos of Jacob entering hotels with another woman not Emily. "This is..." She swallowed hard. "This is fake. You fabricated this to hurt me. Like those fake hotel receipts on our joint credit card? The ones you used to fund your little romance?" Mark stepped around the desk. "Or maybe the fake texts where you mocked me to your boyfriend. Called me weak? Pathetic? Would you like me to quote them?" Emily backed away. "Stop it. My personal favorite was the one about couples therapy. How did you put it? He actually cried about our emotional connection. God, it was pathetic. That must have given you and Jacob quite a laugh. I never meant to get caught." Mark moved closer, watching her retreat until her back hit the door. "To have your perfect little affair exposed? To face consequences for once in your privileged life? What do you want from me?" Emily's voice cracked. "An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. Is that what you need to hear?" Mark's expression hardened. "What I need is for you to understand something." He planted his hands on either side of her head, trapping her against the door. "You thought you knew me. Thought you could predict how I'd react. The weak, passive husband who'd eventually forgive and forget." Emily's breath caught. For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. "That man is dead," Mark continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You killed him the moment you decided to betray everything we built together. And the man who replaced him? He's not nearly as forgiving. Are you threatening me?" "Threatening?" Mark stepped back, smiling coldly. "No, Emily. I'm promising you, by the time I'm done, you'll understand exactly how badly you underestimated me." He returned to his desk, sitting down as if their conversation had been about nothing more important than the weather. "You might want to prepare a good explanation for HR. Those photos are just the beginning." Emily's hand shook as she grabbed the doorknob. "You're insane." "No." Mark's eyes met hers. "I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." She fled the office, leaving the file of Jacob's history scattered across the floor. Mark waited until her footsteps faded before pulling out his phone. Time to move to the next phase that he dialed a number he'd memorized weeks ago. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Yeah, Mr. Mitchell? This is Thomas from Riverside Capital's Compliance Department. We need to discuss some concerning transactions we've discovered in your client accounts. On the other end, Jacob's breath hitched. What? What kind of transactions? I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Are you familiar with the Blue Room Bar? Let's meet there tonight at 8. And Mr. Mitchell? I strongly suggest you come alone. Mark ended the call, satisfaction coursing through him. Jacob's gambling history made him the perfect target for this particular fear. The mere suggestion of financial impropriety would have him sweating bullets. Opening his laptop, Mark began preparing for the evening's confrontation. He'd chosen the Blue Room, carefully isolated location, minimal security cameras, private booths where conversations couldn't be overheard. The perfect place for a predator to corner his prey, and Jacob was about to learn just what kind of predator he'd awakened when he decided to pursue a married woman. The Blue Room lived up to its name, casting everything in a dim azure glow that turned shadows into liquid darkness. Mark sat in the furthest booth, watching the door through the bottom of his whiskey glass. He'd arrived an hour early to prepare, choosing his position carefully back to the wall, clear view of both exits, away from the security camera's limited range. At exactly 8, Jacob walked in. The confident swagger Mark had observed outside his apartment was gone, replaced by nervous energy as he scanned the nearly empty bar. Mark allowed himself a small smile. Amazing how quickly the mention of financial irregularities could shake a man's confidence. Mr. Mitchell. Mark raised his hand, pitching his voice slightly lower than usual. Over here, Jacob approached, his expensive suit failing to hide the tension in his shoulders. Are you Thomas? From compliance? Have a seat. Mark gestured to the booth across from him. Can I get you a drink? No, I'd rather discuss these transactions you mentioned. Jacob sat, his fingers drumming against the table. What exactly did you find? Mark took a slow sip of his whiskey. Interesting patterns, similar to ones we've seen before. With your previous gambling issues, the color drained from Jacob's face. How did you know about that? Mark set his glass down carefully. I make it my business to know everything about the men who fuck my wife. Recognition flickered across Jacob's features, followed quickly by fear. You're Mark Harrison, Emily's husband, the one you and she have been laughing about in your texts. Mark's smile never reached his eyes. Though I doubt you'll find this conversation very amusing. Jacob started to stand. I'm leaving. Sit down. Mark's voice carried enough quiet authority that Jacob hesitated. We haven't finished our discussion about your indiscretions. Look, Jacob settled back into his seat, trying to regain his composure. What happened with Emily? It's complicated, but it's between consenting adults. Complicated? Mark leaned forward. Let's simplify it. You pursued a married woman. You helped destroy an 8-year marriage. You mocked and humiliated her husband in private messages. Does that about cover it? If you're looking for an apology? Mark's laugh was sharp enough to make Jacob flinch. From a man who called me, and I quote, a pathetic cuck who needs his balls back? No, I don't want your apology. I want something else entirely. Jacob's hand crept toward his pocket. If you're threatening me, the phone won't help you. Mark pulled out Jacob's iPhone, placing it on the table between them. Amazing how easily people leave their cars unlocked during their morning gym routine. Real fear crept into Jacob's eyes as he patted his empty pocket. What do you want? Want? I want you to understand something. Mark's voice dropped to a near whisper. Every action has consequences. Every choice creates ripples. You chose to pursue my wife, to mock my pain, to revel in my humiliation. Now it's time to face the ripples. Is that supposed to scare me? Jacob tried to sound confident, but his voice wavered. I've dealt with angry husbands before. Have you? And did those husbands know about the $2 million you lost at the Bellagio? Or the loans you're still paying off? How about the insider trading investigation that got quietly buried 3 years ago? Jacob's face went ashen. How did you, or perhaps, Mark continued as if Jacob hadn't spoken, they knew about your current activities? The creative accounting you've been doing with client funds? Amazing what a good private investigator can uncover. You're bluffing. Am I? Mark pulled out a thick folder. Would you like to see the documentation? The bank records? The witness statements? I'm sure the SEC would find it fascinating reading. Jacob's hands shook as he reached for the folder. What do you want from me? First, you're going to end things with Emily. Today. No explanations, no goodbye fuck, no closure. You're just going to disappear from her life. And if I refuse? Mark's smile widened. Then this folder goes to the SEC, your firm's board of directors, and every client whose money you've been playing with. How long do you think you'll last in prison, Jacob? With your pretty face and expensive tastes? You're insane, Jacob whispered. No, I'm just no longer playing by the rules you expected. Mark stood slowly. You have 1 hour to end it with Emily. Then you're going to take a job offer in another city. I hear Seattle has an opening that would suit you. And if you ever contact Emily again, if you ever breathe a word of this conversation to anyone. He let the threat hang in the air. Jacob stared at the folder, his face a mask of defeat. You've thought of everything, haven't you? Almost. Mark's fist connected with Jacob's jaw before the other man could react, sending him sprawling from the booth. That was for calling me pathetic. What followed was a blur of violence, precise and calculated. Mark had chosen this isolated corner of the bar for a reason. By the time the bartender noticed the commotion, it was over. Mark stood over Jacob's crumpled form, breathing heavily. Remember this moment the next time you think about pursuing a married woman. Remember what happened when you chose the wrong husband to mock. He picked up Jacob's phone, placing it next to his head. 1 hour. End it with Emily, or the folder goes public. And Jacob? He knelt down, his voice dropping to a whisper. If you ever breathe a word of what happened here, I'll make sure everyone knows about the things you do with your secretary in the conference room after hours. I have video of that too. Mark straightened his jacket and walked out, leaving Jacob groaning on the floor. In his car, he pulled out his own phone, checking the time. Emily would be waiting for Jacob's usual evening call. Instead, she would receive a brief text ending their affair, followed by silence. Phase 2 of his plan was complete. Now for the final act, opening his laptop. Mark began composing emails to Emily's closest friends and colleagues. Each would receive carefully selected evidence of her infidelity, her cruel messages, her betrayal. By morning, her entire social circle would know exactly what kind of person she really was. Emily had wanted excitement, craved something beyond her boring marriage. Mark smiled grimly as he worked. She was about to get more excitement than she'd ever bargained for. Emily burst into Mark's home office at midnight, her mascara streaked down her face, phone clutched in her trembling hand. What did you do? Mark looked up from his computer with practiced indifference. You'll have to be more specific. Jacob. Her voice cracked. He ended everything, just a text saying it's over, and now he won't answer my calls. His number's disconnected. She slammed her hands on his desk. What did you do to him? Me? Mark's eyebrows rose. I've been here all evening working. Maybe he finally developed a conscience. Liar. Emily's shriek echoed off the walls. This is you written all over it. First the photos at work. Now this. Sounds like your perfect romance isn't so perfect after all. Mark turned back to his computer. Though I'm curious, did he mention the secretary he was also sleeping with? Or did that not come up in your intimate conversations? Emily's face went pale. What are you talking about? Oh, you didn't know? Mark pulled up a video file, turning the screen toward her. The security footage clearly showed Jacob and his secretary in an intimate embrace. Guess you weren't as special as you thought. This can't be real. Unlike your fake conferences and late meetings. Mark's voice hardened. Tell me, Emily, how does it feel to be on the receiving end of betrayals? She sank into a chair, her anger crumbling into despair. Why are you doing this? Why? Mark stood slowly. Because you destroyed everything we built together. Because you mocked me, humiliated me, treated my love like a weakness to be exploited. He moved around the desk. Because you needed to learn that actions have consequences. So this is revenge. Emily's laugh was hollow. Destroying my career? Ruining my relationship? No, this is just the beginning. Mark leaned against his desk. You see, while you were busy playing your little games, I was planning, learning, preparing. For what? For the moment when you realize exactly how badly you underestimated me. Mark's smile was cold. Did you check your email tonight? Or your social media? Emily's eyes widened. She grabbed her phone, fingers shaking as she opened her email. Her gasp told him the moment she saw it dozens of messages from friends and colleagues, all responding to the evidence he'd sent them of her affair. You didn't. Every message where you mocked our marriage. Every cruel joke about my attempts to save our relationship. Every detail of your sordid little affair. Mark watched her scroll through her phone in horror. I sent it all. These are private messages. Emily's voice rose with panic. You had no right, like you had no right to share intimate details of our marriage with your lovers? Mark's voice was razor-sharp. To laugh about our therapy sessions? To mock my pain for his entertainment? Tears streamed down Emily's face as she read message after message from friends expressing their disgust, their disappointment, their shock at her betrayal. I'll lose everything, she whispered. Now you understand how it feels. Mark returned to his seat. To have your life dismantled piece by piece. To watch everything you built crumble around you. Emily stood on shaking legs. I'll tell everyone what you did. How you stalked us, hacked our phones. Go ahead. Mark's calm never wavered. Tell them how your husband discovered your affair. How he found evidence of your betrayal. How he exposed your lies. He leaned forward. Who do you think they'll sympathize with, Emily? The faithful husband who uncovered his wife's infidelity? Or the cheating wife who destroyed her marriage for a man who was sleeping with his secretary? She staggered back as the full weight of her situation hit her. This isn't you. The Mark I knew would never. The Mark you knew died the moment he read those messages. He turned back to his computer. The man you're dealing with now is someone entirely different. Someone you created with your betrayal. I'll fight you on this. Emily's voice shook despite her attempt at defiance. The divorce, the house, everything. Mark's laughter was cold. With what evidence? What lawyer? What money? He met her eyes. Check our joint account balance. She fumbled with her phone again. The color drained from her face as she saw the transfers he'd made. That's... She swallowed hard. That's our savings. Half of it, yes. My half. Mark's smile was predatory. Legally transferred after documenting your infidelity. Good luck explaining those hotel receipts to a divorce judge. Emily sank back into the chair, all fight leaving her body. What do you want from me? I want you to understand something. Mark stood, walking to where she sat. You thought you knew me. Thought you could predict how I'd react to your betrayal. You called me weak, pathetic, safe. He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper. But you forgot something crucial, Emily. The most dangerous predators are the ones that wait patiently in the shadows, watching, learning, planning their attack. You're insane, she whispered. No, I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. He straightened up. Now, I suggest you start looking for a new place to live. And a good lawyer. He returned to his desk. Though I doubt you'll find one willing to take your case once they see the evidence I've compiled. Emily stumbled to her feet and fled the office. Mark listened to her footsteps race up the stairs, followed by the slam of the guest room door. He opened his laptop, checking the timestamp on the scheduled email set to go out tomorrow morning. More evidence, more revelations, more carefully planned destruction of Emily's carefully constructed world. She thought this was the end. She had no idea it was just the beginning. Emily stared at her computer screen, her hands frozen over the keyboard as email after email flooded her inbox. Each notification sound felt like another nail in her coffin. Her colleagues' responses ranged from professional disappointment to personal disgust, all reacting to the evidence Mark had distributed of her affair. Emily, her boss's voice made her jump. My office. Now. The walk down the office corridor felt like a march to the gallows. Every eye followed her progress, whispers trailing in her wake. Inside the office, Mr. Davidson sat behind his desk, his expression grave. Close the door. Emily's hands trembled as she complied. Sir, I can explain. Explain what, exactly? He gestured to his monitor. The inappropriate relationship with a client? The misuse of company resources to conduct your affair? Or perhaps the explicit photos taken in our conference room? Those photos were private. Nothing is private when it involves company liability. Davidson's voice was ice. Do you have any idea the position you've put us in? Jacob Mitchell, isn't just any client. His firm represents millions in annual revenue. Emily sank into a chair. I never meant to get caught. Davidson slid a document across his desk. This is your termination notice. We'll pay out your remaining vacation days, but I need your badge and parking pass now. You're firing me? Just like that? Just like that? His laugh was bitter. Emily, half our clients received emails detailing your indiscretions. Photos, text messages, explicit descriptions of acts performed in company facilities. He leaned forward. You're lucky we're not pursuing legal action for breach of contract. This isn't fair. Emily's voice rose with desperation. Mark did this. He's trying to destroy me. Your husband? Davidson's eyebrows rose. The same husband you mocked in messages to Mitchell? The one you betrayed and humiliated. He shook his head. From where I'm sitting, you destroyed yourself. Please. Tears streamed down Emily's face. I'll do anything. Take a pay cut. Transfer departments. Clean out your desk by noon. Davidson's tone brooked no argument. Security will escort you out. Emily stumbled from the office in a daze. At her desk, whispers and stares followed her every move as she packed her personal items into a cardboard box. 8 years of career building. Gone in a morning, her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Rebecca. How could you? Those messages about Mark during therapy. That's beyond cruel. Don't contact me again. Another notification. Her sister's message. Mom's crying. Dad can't even speak, he's so ashamed. Hope the affair was worth destroying our family. Message after message, each one severing another relationship. By the time security arrived to escort her out, Emily's entire social circle had crumbled. That I in her car. She tried calling Jacob again. His number was still disconnected. His office claimed he'd accepted a position in Seattle, effective immediately. No forwarding contact information available. Damn you, Mark, she whispered, gripping her steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Damn you to hell. Her phone rang, speaking of the devil. She answered with a snarl. Happy now? You've ruined everything. Everything. Mark's voice was calm. No, Emily. This is just the beginning. What more could you possibly do? Check your email. I just sent you something interesting from our joint account. Emily's hands shook as she opened her banking app. The color drained from her face as she saw the transfers, half their savings gone. You can't do this. Actually, I can. And did. All perfectly legal. Documented after discovering your infidelity. She could hear the smile in his voice. Good luck paying for that luxury apartment you've been eyeing. Or a decent lawyer. I'll fight you on this, Emily threatened. I'll tell everyone what you did. What I did. Mark's laugh was cold. You mean discover my wife's affair? Expose her betrayal? Document her cruelty? His voice hardened. Go ahead. Tell everyone. Show them the messages where you mocked me during therapy. Where you brag about sexual acts with Jacob that you denied me. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Why are you doing this? Because you thought you knew me. Thought you could predict how I'd react. The weak, passive husband who'd eventually forgive and forget. A pause. You forgot something crucial. Emily. The most dangerous predators are the ones that wait patiently, planning their revenge. You're sick, she whispered. No, I'm just no longer the man you thought you could walk all over. The sound of typing came through the phone. Oh, and Emily? You might want to start looking for a new gym. I just forwarded those texts about your trainer to the owner. Seems you have quite a pattern of inappropriate relationships. The line went dead before she could respond. Emily sat in her car, watching former colleagues stream past, carefully avoiding her gaze. Her phone continued buzzing with messages, friends unfriending her on social media, family members expressing their disgust, professional contacts severing ties. That email notification caught her eye. Divorce papers from Mark's lawyer. The documentation was comprehensive, leaving her no room to contest anything. Every betrayal, every cruel message, every misused joint fund, all carefully cataloged and presented. Emily's carefully constructed world was crumbling, and she could do nothing but watch it fall. The apartment felt cold and empty, a far cry from the luxury condo Emily had imagined sharing with Jacob. Instead, She sat on a second-hand couch in a one-bedroom unit on the wrong side of town, all she could afford after Mark's systematic dismantling of her finances. Her phone rang, displaying her mother's number. Emily's hand hovered over it, hope fluttering in her chest. After 3 weeks of silence, maybe, how could you? Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. Your father had to leave church this morning. Everyone was talking about those messages you sent. Those things you wrote about Mark. Emily's throat tightened. Mom, please, he loved you, supported you, and you. A sob broke through the line. You mocked him when he cried during therapy? Shared intimate details of your marriage with that man? I made a mistake. Her mother's voice hardened. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did. Another pause. Don't call us again, Emily. Not until you understand what you've done. The line went dead. Emily stared at her phone, another piece of her world crumbling away. Her social media accounts where Ghost Town's friends and family had either blocked her or posted public messages condemning her actions that a knock at her door made her jump. She opened it to find a courier holding a package. Emily Harrison? Yes. Sign here. The package was small, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Emily's hands trembled as she opened it, then dropped it with a scream. Inside, perfectly preserved, lay a piece of male anatomy. Underneath it, divorce papers waited for her signature. Her phone rang again. Mark, you. She could barely form words. You monster. Monster? Mark's voice was eerily calm. Interesting choice of words from someone who laughed at her husband's pain, who mocked his attempts to save our marriage. What did you do to Jacob? I simply helped him understand the consequences of his actions. A pause. Don't worry, he'll live. Though his love life might be somewhat diminished. Emily ran to her bathroom, retching into the toilet. When she returned to the phone, Mark was still there. Why? She whispered. Why go this far? Because you needed to learn something? Mark's voice took on a teaching tone. Actions have consequences. Choices create ripples. You chose to betray me, to humiliate me, to treat my love as weakness. Another pause. Now you're experiencing the ripples. I'll go to the police. With what evidence? An anonymous package? And how will you explain the contents of your phone? The messages to Jacob? The photos? Mark's laugh was cold. Face it, Emily. You have nothing. Emily sank to her floor, bones turning to water. What do you want from me? Want? I have everything I want. Your career is in shambles. Your lover is gone. Your friends and family have abandoned you. She could hear him shuffling papers. Oh, and the divorce is final next week. I assume you can't afford to contest it? Tears streamed down Emily's face. I never thought, never imagined. That's your problem, Emily. You never thought, never imagined that your safe, predictable husband could be anything more than what you assumed. His voice hardened. You saw what you wanted to see. The weak man. The pushover. The one you could betray without consequences. Please, she whispered. I'll do anything. There's nothing left to do. Your life, as you knew it, is over. Mark's tone was matter-of-fact. The career you built? Gone. The social circle you cultivated? Destroyed. The man you thought would give you excitement? Disappeared. A final pause. All that's left is for you to understand exactly how badly you underestimated me. Mark, goodbye, Emily. Enjoy your new life. I hear the diner on 5th is hiring waitresses. The line went dead. Emily stared at the package on her floor, her mind racing with implications. Jacob's sudden disappearance. The piece of him left as a warning. The complete destruction of her carefully built life. She'd thought she knew her husband. Thought she could predict his reactions based on 8 years of marriage. Instead, she'd awakened something darker, more calculating than she could have imagined. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Her bank account was overdrawn. Credit cards maxed out. The meager savings she'd managed to hide gone. Mark had thought of everything. Every escape route, every possible refuge, every potential ally. He'd cut them all off one by one, until she was left with nothing but the consequences of her choices. The divorce papers seemed to mock her from inside the package. Her hands shook as she reached for them, knowing she had no choice but to sign. No money for a lawyer. No evidence that wouldn't further incriminate her. No options left. Emily Harrison, who had once had everything, sat alone in her cheap apartment, surrounded by the ruins of her life. Finally understanding the full cost of underestimating a man's capacity for revenge. Mark stood in his empty house, surveying the bare walls where photos of his life with Emily once hung. The moving company had taken the last of his belongings that morning. All that remained was a laptop on the kitchen counter and a single envelope. His phone buzzed with a message from his lawyer. Divorce finalized. Papers signed. You're officially a free man. A smile crossed his face as he opened his laptop, checking his encrypted email account. Multiple messages confirmed his plans were in place. New identity papers waiting in a safety deposit box. Offshore account secured. Job lined up in another city under his new name. His phone rang Emily's number. After a moment's consideration, he answered. I signed them. Her voice was hollow, defeated. The divorce papers. You won. Won. Mark leaned against the counter. This wasn't a game, Emily. This was consequences. You destroyed everything. The words came out as a whisper. My career, my friendships, my family, no. Mark's voice hardened. You destroyed those things the moment you chose to betray our marriage. I simply made sure everyone saw who you really are. And Jacob? What you did to him? Consider it a parting gift. Something to remember me by. Mark opened the envelope on the counter, admiring his new driver's license. Though I doubt either of you will forget. A choked sob came through the line. I never thought you could be so cruel. That was your mistake. Mark's voice was eerily calm. You thought you knew me. Thought you could predict my reactions based on who I pretended to be. He paused. You never considered that your safe, predictable husband might be capable of something more. The police will do nothing. Mark cut her off. No evidence. No witnesses. Just the ramblings of a disgraced woman who betrayed her husband. He smiled. Besides, I'll be gone before you hang up this phone. Gone? Fear crept into Emily's voice. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. New name. New city. New life. Mark closed his laptop. The man you married? He no longer exists. You killed him with your betrayal. You can't just disappear. Actually, I can. And will. Mark picked up his keys. The house is yours, by the way. My final gift. Though you might have trouble keeping it on a waitress's salary. Please, Emily's voice cracked. Don't do this. It's already done. Mark walked to the front door. Goodbye, Emily. I hope the excitement you craved was worth the price. He ended the call and blocked her number. Outside, his new car waited in the driveway, sleek, black, untraceable. Everything he owned now existed under his new identity. Carefully constructed over months of planning, his phone buzzed one final time. A message from his private investigator, confirming Jacob had taken the job in Seattle. The man hadn't been seen in public since their encounter at the Blue Room, and rumors swirled about his sudden health issues. Mark smiled as he started the car. Everything had played out exactly as planned. Emily's life was in ruins, her reputation destroyed, her lover permanently marked by his revenge. The carefully crafted facade she'd built around herself had crumbled, revealing the truth of her character to everyone who knew her. As he pulled out of the driveway for the last time, Mark glanced in his rearview mirror. The house where he'd lived with Emily grew smaller, along with the life he was leaving behind. 8 years of memories, tainted by betrayal, now reduced to nothing more than a lesson in consequences. His new identity waited in the envelope beside him. New papers, new background, new beginning. The offshore accounts held enough money to start fresh. While Emily would spend years rebuilding from the ashes of her former life, the highway stretched before him, leading to a city where no one knew his name or his story, where he could rebuild without the shadow of betrayal hanging over him. He'd planned every detail, considered every angle, ensured that his revenge was as complete as it was untraceable. Emily had wanted excitement, craved something beyond her safe, predictable marriage. Instead, she learned a crucial truth. The most dangerous predators are the ones that hide in plain sight. Waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike, Mark merged onto the interstate, leaving behind the ruins of his old life. In his mind, he could see Emily standing in her cheap apartment, staring at divorce papers and a gruesome reminder of the consequences of betrayal. He could imagine her checking her empty bank accounts, her silent phone, her absent friends and family. She had thought him weak, had believed she could walk away unscathed from her betrayal. Now she understood exactly how wrong she had been. The highway signs blurred past as Mark drove toward his new life. Behind him lay the wreckage of his revenge, a devastated wife, a mutilated lover, a marriage destroyed by betrayal. Ahead lay freedom, a fresh start, and the satisfaction of knowing he had made them pay for every moment of humiliation. They had underestimated him, mistaking patience for weakness, calculation for cowardice. That mistake had cost them everything. The sun set behind him as Mark drove away from his old life, his revenge complete, his enemies broken, and his future wide open. Emily and Jacob would spend the rest of their lives dealing with the consequences of their choices, while he disappeared into a new identity, leaving behind nothing but the memory of what happens when you mistake a predator for prey.